answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility.
Whether it's the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, the business. We've been engaging closely with businesses to make sure that we can understand what we can do to support them and support British industry and British jobs.
Meanwhile, markets have opened heavily down in Asia in the first full week of trading since Donald Trump announced his tariffs. Tokyo's Nikkei lost nearly 8% and Australia's main index tumbled by more than 6%. The US president has been speaking on board Air Force One.
I was elected on this. This was one of the biggest reasons I got elected. What's going to happen with the market, I can't tell you, but I can tell you our country has gotten a lot stronger. And eventually, it'll be a country like no other. It'll be the most dominant country economically in the world.
There'll be further talks today to try to end Birmingham's bin crisis. Refuse collectors from the Unite Union went on all-out strike 4 weeks ago. NHS workers say members of the public are filming them and threatening to post the footage online. A survey by Unison revealed that 1 in 7 have experienced unwanted and intrusive filming or photography. In sport, Southampton have been demoted back to the Championship, breaking a record in the process after a 3-1 defeat to Tottenham Hotspur. It's the earliest relegation in Premier League history, with 7 games remaining. And Imelda Staunton has won her 5th Olivier Award, this time for Best Actress in a Musical. She's currently starring in Hello Dolly at the London Palladium. The other big winners of the night were The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and Fiddler on the Roof. That's the latest. I'm Stevie Shillinglaw.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6 and we are here, ladies and gentlemen. It's Monday, the 7th of April. Lots of things are going on. Lots of things are kicking in today. The national insurance hike is underway. That means that an awful lot of companies are going to be a lot worse off as of right now. It means also that the bridge and the toll tunnels are coming in. So there's 2 big tunnels opening up with tolls this morning. If you happen to be driving into London, I know it's a school holiday, so you might not be doing it. But the old Blackwall Tunnel, which didn't used to have a toll, now has one. And the new Blackwall Tunnel, which is called the Silvertown Tunnel, that also has one. So that will cost you more money than it used to, because it used to be free, which is an extraordinary state of affairs. A couple of amazing stories on the front pages of the papers. Reds Arrows, it says, as an exclusive on the front page of The Sun. Believe it or not, Britain's Red Arrows display team are thinking about trading in their iconic fleet of aircraft for some that were designed in, wait for it, Russia. That doesn't sound like a great idea, does it? The RAF are up in arms about it, and so they bleeding well should be. Keir Starmer, meanwhile, is on some of the front pages talking about relaxing green rules in order to protect the UK car industry. Well, it's a bit late for that, isn't it? Apparently he wants to safeguard Vauxhall, who've already lost about 6,000 jobs up in Luton. He wants to safeguard Rolls-Royce. He wants to safeguard McLaren. He wants to safeguard Jaguar and Land Rover, who have already kiboshed their own brand by going all woke. And he claims that you're going to be able to keep your hybrid car now for an extra 5 years. Don't worry about the world ending, and don't worry about the world burning up, because Keir Starmer is the motorist friend on the front page of The Sun. They call him White Van Man's Plan. Daily Telegraph has got an even better story, which is door-to-door NHS to tackle health crisis. These are the people who can't actually organise your healthcare inside a hospital. Now they want to come and do it in your house. As it was pointed out by my producer Christian this morning, presumably now you'll just wait in your own corridor as opposed to waiting in one of theirs. 0344 499 1000. Can you imagine going door to door? Some guy knocking on the door, hello? I'm here to do your prostate exam. I don't want one of those. I actually asked for some prescription drugs for my headache. Oh, sorry about that. They've sent the wrong person. We'll wait another 10 hours for that. Meanwhile, on the prostate front, 9 out of 10 GPs calling for an NHS prostate screening programme. That's on the front page of the Mail. Well, again, they can't organise these things inside clinics and hospitals. What makes you think they can now add in even more layers of NHS healthcare? I don't know why you'd want to do that. Long Haul Hoyle, the Speaker of the House, has been talking about why, indeed, he, of course, thinks that he's entitled to go around the world spreading the word of Parliament. He says that he's speaking truth to power. Of course, we'll tell you all about the bad weekend Keir Starmer had. 2 of his MPs refused entry to Israel. One of them arrested on child sex charges. And so much more going on as well. There's an XL bully loose in Sheffield, apparently, so watch out for that. And Gen Z apparently don't like champagne. Champagne sales are down for the first time ever because young people just simply aren't drinking it. Well, there's not a lot to celebrate, is there? 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. And, of course, coming up a little bit later on, Harry Cole will join us from The Sun. He's written a piece, having been to America, where the Trump tariff story is still going very, very well indeed, but it seems to have fallen off the front pages for the moment in London. And he says everybody he meets in America thinks that Britain has gone completely bonkers mad. And they're not wrong, are they? Tom Slater's here. Very good morning to you, Tom. We'll be talking to Harry Cole about that later on. He was in California, you know, not exactly a hotbed of sort of MAGA, you know, Trump fanery. And they were all going, what's happened to Britain? You know, why has Britain gone so well? Why are they locking people up for Facebook posts? You know, why are they letting so many migrants in? I mean, this is the narrative now that Britain has kind of lost the plot.
No, absolutely. I think a lot of people see this through the lens of probably social media, but it's not far wrong, is it?
Well, it
in terms of how bad things have gotten.
Well, over the weekend we saw a piece by Alison Pearce in the Telegraph about Lucy Connolly, who not only has been locked up for 31 months for a Facebook post, you know, while people who are on sex charges are kind of wandering the streets, but she wasn't even allowed home to visit her family, which most prisoners are allowed to do out of kindness, you know, and they're actually punishing her further by not letting her do that.
No, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, the fact that we've seen so many people get barely a slap on the wrist for actually something criminal that they've done rather than something criminal that they've said.
Yes.
It's the fact that we're policing speech to this degree anyway is a nightmare. But as you say, the fact that it's that disproportionate as well between, again, acts of theft, violence, whatever, and people just talking, sounding off, sometimes saying unpleasant things on the internet. I think a lot of people in America are shocked because they've got a proper kind of free speech tradition over there in a way that we don't, certainly not in recent years.
Yeah, right.
But it's a good reminder that it doesn't have to be this way, and I think when Americans see it and comment upon it, you get a bit more of a different kind of perspective.
Yeah, you really do.
This is so crazy.
Well, it is, and as Harry says in his piece, you know, it's time for us to stop being all superior about how we're the greatest country in the world, and, you know, everybody looks to Britain for a sort of, you know, a shaft of light of intellectual ability and education and all the things that Britain used to be famous for, none of which it's now famous for, which is pretty embarrassing.
No, absolutely, and I think particularly on the censorship front, it's fair to say we've become like a bit of an international laughingstock, certainly amongst many Western countries, in terms of what happens when you have this crazy experiment with trying to police hate and thought and speech. This is where you end up putting people in prison for longer for Facebook posts than for actually.
And funny enough, there's a piece on the front page of the Times today where young British Muslims are growing more disillusioned and isolated because of the Middle East conflict, and the government has to consider integration a national security issue. Well, hello, why didn't you think of that in the first place? You know, they're basically saying, this is the head of the Muslim World League, saying that there's a real challenge now between Muslims and non-Muslims in a country like Britain. And I mean, if you're in America looking at that, you're going to go, well, Britain has gone mad, you know, because they've allowed the Gaza conflict to somehow put two different sides of an extreme against each other.
No, absolutely, and the way in which international conflicts now divide up our own nations is a real problem. And I think even though we've heard this kind of call time and time again, surely now that has to be heeded, that we actually have to take these issues of integration.
Well, you would think so.
Seriously.
And it was highlighted, wasn't it, yesterday, when these two Labour MPs, Yuan Yang and Absitam Mohammed, you know, one of whom was born in China, one of whom was born in Yemen. I suppose some might say there's nothing wrong with that, but it kind of indicates where we are. You know, both of whom have been very critical of Israel in the Gaza conflict, went to Israel for a fact-finding mission, only to find that they weren't being let into the country because Israel accused them of planning to make some kind of, you know, propaganda trip out of it, which would be anti-Israel.
And that they were going there to sort of inspect the security services and things. I mean, you can, any time that you have British MPs who are being denied entry to a allied power. On the one hand, you have to certainly take that very seriously.
Yeah.
You've got to ask questions of even your kind of closest allies as to why this is taking place. These are elected representatives, British citizens at the end of the day. But still a lot swirling around about on what grounds this decision was made, because it did seem quite brash.
Well, the Israelis say that these people have consistently been critical of Israel, and obviously they feel more sensitively about these things. It's not like somebody having to go at Britain and saying it's bonkers. It's about people coming to a place that's literally at war, and why are they coming, and what are they there for? And here's what Kemi Badenoch had to say about it on Laura Kunzberg's show.
If you look at the reasons why the Israeli government has given for why they're not letting them in, they don't believe that they're going to comply with their laws. MPs do not have diplomatic immunity. I believe that the people who represent us in Parliament should be people who should be able to go anywhere in the world, and people not be worried about what they're going to do when they go into those countries.
Are you suggesting the Israelis were right to worry that these two Labour politicians would break the law if they got into the country?
Well, that's the reason they gave. And what I believe is that every country should be able to control its borders. We do the same thing. There are many people that we don't allow into our country, and I don't think we should be setting precedents in a different way.
So, just to be clear, you believe the Israeli government's account of this, not the Foreign Secretary who says they were treated unacceptably?
The Foreign Secretary has given his view. I've given my view.
And of course, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, who was very, very critical of Israel and of Kemi Badenoch, said, you know, this is entirely unacceptable. Is the same Foreign Secretary who called for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu if he was to set foot on British soil for war crimes, which of course Israel has consistently denied. So there's a bit of a kind of a credibility gap here, isn't there?
Oh no, absolutely. I think that decision that he took and the government took, insofar as saying that yes, we support Israel, our ally, but if their elected leader comes here, we will put him in handcuffs. I mean, it was just a ridiculous.
I mean, to be fair, Labour didn't stand by that. Starmer said he didn't agree with that particular point. But they also had called for Geert Wilders to be banned from coming to Britain when he was an elected representative of the Dutch Parliament. So, you know, what exactly, even Dan Hodges was saying, what exactly is their point here?
No, exactly. It's just sort of sixth form of politics, really. You know, these if you're dealing with people who represent large swathes of their own nations, you have to take those people seriously, whether you agree with them. And
Israel said about Abtisam Mohammed that she has never once tweeted about what happened on October the 7th. She's never once tweeted about Hamas in a negative way whatsoever, but she has consistently tweeted about Israel, and she has consistently represented the casualty figures as those from Hamas, which I think they're entitled to feel is a hostile act.
Oh no, absolutely. But I suppose the question is, does that marry up with the justifications for refusing them entry, which wasn't just, you know, the basis of their views, which again, I think, if we're talking about politicians being able to go to allied countries, even if the administrations there disagree with them, this is still something that should raise eyebrows, I think. Even though it has turned into a bit of a silly partisan row between Kemi Badenoch and the Labour Party. 'Twas ever thus, but, you know, there's a...
But you have to wonder as well what is going on inside the Labour Party if they've got so many MPs who are so pro-Palestine that they can't actually see Israel's point of view whatsoever. And I think Israel, in that case, are entitled to go, well, you know, we have a reasonable, you know, a suspicion that you might be coming here to cause a bit of trouble and to make things worse for Israel. So, you know, on that basis, they wouldn't be let into a lot of countries.
I mean, and the divide on that issue within the Labour Party is a big problem for them, because now that they're in government, they have to play much more serious politics. They can't go around posturing against Israel. They can't go around demonising Israel in the same way. They know that they're a key ally. They know that it's important, hopefully, that Hamas is defeated and so on. But at the same time, a large proportion of Labour MPs glean to a very kind of anti-Israel, Israelophobic line.
And that is the problem.
It just is what it is.
And it might not surprise you that Yuan Yang used to work for the BBC.
There we go.
In addition to having all sorts of connections to China. Let's talk about the green rules. Keir Starmer is set to announce today, I think he's going up to the Midlands. He'll probably have his sleeves rolled up, would be my prediction. He's going to be saying he's going to make it cheaper and easier to own an electric car. As he warns that President Trump's tariffs are not a phase. We'll be bringing you news of what the markets are doing this morning, of course, but all sorts of doom and gloom going on over the weekend about tariffs. But an awful lot of tariff-prone countries have already said to Donald Trump, well, I'll tell you what, we'll reduce our tariffs on the United States goods to zero. So that would appear to be something that he would have wanted them to do, wouldn't it?
You know, absolutely. I mean, it's not just tariffs, I suppose, in terms of how they calculated these quote-unquote reciprocal tariffs. It seems like their primary concern is just the general balance of trade, which is not always as straightforward a thing to actually address. But I think the point that this isn't going away is obviously true. The idea that this was going to be like a short-term bludgeon negotiating tactic. If it is a negotiating tactic, it's got more of a long view to it than
yes,
the
I think
future.
so. I mean, basically, Starmer's going to deliver this speech in the West Midlands. He's going to say that the British industry must adapt because the tariffs are here to stay. The world has fundamentally changed. This is going to be one of their mantras for a while, isn't it? He's going to announce the relaxation of the electric vehicle mandate, which means that the proportion of a manufacturer's sales that must be of EVs to alleviate fears that fines of £15,000 per non-compliant car sold on top of the 25% US duty could sound a death knell. Because at the moment, British car manufacturers get fined for every car over a certain levy that they sell, which is not an electric car. And guess who gets that money? China. So, I mean, this is the policy that we've been having. So when people in America say, has Britain gone bonkers? Well, yeah, it has, because we were taking money away from British manufacturers, fining them, and giving that money to Chinese electric car manufacturers. So already there's a disconnect there, isn't there?
No, it just doesn't make any sense. And also, where electric cars are concerned, if people were so desperate to buy them, you wouldn't need these like Stalinist targets to try and force factories to produce so many of them. It's there's a certain point in which this is like trying to just push water uphill. You know, if you create an electric vehicle which people feel ticks all the same boxes, if you deal with all of those issues with charge points and whatever, then sure, people will start buying them. But this kind of idea that you could basically force the public to change their habits and also force the technology along in a way that it doesn't seem like it's going to in short order.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm hoping this is the beginning of a much bigger winding down.
There's so much wrong with, as you say, putting targets on companies, on proper business models, and to try and manipulate the market. That's not. If people want the cars, they'll buy them. If the cars are made better and they're made cheaper and they're made more efficient and they're capable of running further, then more people would buy them. I've often said, look, if you can make an electric car that's better than the petrol car that I've got, then I'd be happy to buy one if it's cheaper, but not if it's 50% more expensive and I have to stop every couple of 100 miles to charge it. I'm just not having it.
It's not as if people are kind of against electric cars on principle. They just love, driving a diesel or petrol. It's purely because they're not very good. We don't have the infrastructure and the charge points either. There's all these issues surrounding them. Also, if you want to move towards electric vehicles, you've got to power them with something. And yet we seem to be...
And we haven't got enough electricity.
So they haven't really thought this through.
No, exactly right. But basically, you'll now be able to keep your hybrid car for another 5 years before you have to worry about getting rid of it. It's still not very clear. If you buy, say, for example, in the next 2 or 3 years, if you buy a hybrid car or if you buy a diesel or a petrol car, does it become completely worthless in 2030 or 2035? What happens to it?
No, exactly.
Nobody knows.
No, precisely. And also, especially when trying to push people towards supposedly cleaner vehicles and so on, the one thing they never manage to get their heads around is, like, most people buy their cars second-hand. So that is the idea that you're going to get instant take-up because everyone can just go out and buy a brand spanking new electric vehicle. It's always a nonsense.
And electric vehicles as second-hand vehicles are practically worthless because nobody knows how long the battery's going to last. And if the battery needs replacing, that's the most expensive part of the car. That could be as much as 18,000 quid. So a side issue of it, apparently, according to The Sun on page 6, potholes are going to get worse because in addition to all of the other nonsense going on at the moment, National Insurance means that local government are going to be spending an extra £1.6 billion, right, because they simply have to pay... Sorry, 1.2 billion, because they have to pay for all the extra national insurance costs that are associated with it. And Keir Starmer had allocated 1.6 billion for potholes, so that's all been eaten up. So I'm afraid the potholes aren't going to get fixed.
There we go.
So whichever kind of car you've got is going to be wrecked by the roads.
Absolutely.
Marvellous.
Brace yourselves.
Brilliant. We'll come back to the tariffs in a moment. We've also got Angela Rayner talking about the bin strike in the Midlands, and we'll show you a bit of Le Pen, Marine Le Pen, and a crowd of 100,000 plus people in Paris supporting her and singing the French national anthem. Tom Slater's here, 18 minutes past 6. This is Morning Glory.
needs to be addressed, and may I say, not by the police, is that mindset when they prepare to leave their home. They go, right, OK, where's my phone? Where's my keys? Maybe some cash. Where's my knife? It's that mindset that needs to be addressed. With so many children, they're carrying them because they think it will make them safe. The statistics prove conclusively that if you take a knife out onto the streets, then you are far more likely to become a victim of knife crime yourself.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 22 minutes past 6. I should say, Tom, the last guest on this show was Lizzie Clark, who's a former jockey who came on just before the end of our show on Friday to make us a tip for the Grand National, and she tipped Nick Rockett. And a lot of people listening managed to back it, as I was one of them as well. So I won about 400 quid at the weekend, which I was rather happy about. So, yeah, just remember, Morning Glory is the place to be for horse racing tips. We're 100% on the money at the moment, so we'll see how the next one goes. Let's talk about tariffs, though. Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Darren Jones, was doing the rounds yesterday talking about this country's reaction to Donald Trump's tariffs. Have a look.
Keir has been clear that he is unhappy about the tariffs and broadly unhappy about...
The President's got it wrong.
And broadly unhappy about, tariffs in what was a well-functioning global trading system. I suspect what's being referred to there is the fact that the United Kingdom had the lowest tariff and puts us in a much stronger position than other complex, large economies, which we think was a vindication of our engagement with the United States in the run-up to the President's announcements. But clearly, we don't like tariffs. We're not happy about that. We're now negotiating this economic deal.
We don't like tariffs, even though we put them on things from other countries. I mean, the whole argument is spurious, in my view, that, countries that don't like tariffs actually still put them on other countries. Well, how does that make any sense? Make it make sense, as they say.
No, and there's a lot worse people, kind of culprits for that. Like the European Union, in particular, standing up and getting very upset about...
And they put tariffs on everyone.
No, exactly, and it's the whole point of it is that it's a protectionist bloc with an external tariff, with all kinds of non-tariff barriers. That's the kind of point of it. So for them to then stand up, how atrocious that the leader of the free world is moving away from this era of free trade was full of hypocrisy. Definitely.
Absolutely right. Well, let's see what Donald Trump was saying over the weekend.
We have been treated so badly by other countries because we had stupid leadership that allowed this to happen. They took our businesses, they took our money, they took our jobs, they moved it to Mexico, they moved it to Canada, they moved a lot of it to China, and it's not sustainable. We're not going to do it. Now we have hundreds of billions of dollars that's pouring into our country on a monthly basis. It's pouring, it's already started because they put tariffs on. And eventually it's going to straighten out and our country will be solid and strong again.
And many countries are already talking about, maybe setting up businesses in the US, maybe actually manufacturing there as well to save themselves some tax money and all the rest of it. So, as I was saying last week, you've got to wait and see how this all plays out. Like a lot of Donald Trump's, policies, sometimes it's done for effect. A lot of it is a negotiating tactics. Seb Gorka was on Newsnight the other night having an argument about it there, where he was saying, all of these tariffs are a negotiating position. That is the point. That's the bottom line.
No, absolutely. I think that the difficulty is there was always that kind of confusion about whether or not it's a negotiating tactic, because there are people in and around Trump, J.D. Vance is probably one of them, who sees it as like a longer-term economic bet that you can rebuild American manufacturing behind a tariff wall and so on and so forth. But as you say...
Which might be true.
And it's such early days that it's difficult to work out which of those two stories is correct. So I guess we'll find out. If nothing else, the theory on both sides is going to be tested to destruction in this period.
At the end of the day, what you'll get get is the people who don't like Donald Trump, as we've seen in every single situation, saying how terrible it all is. And it's very hard to find anybody who's kind of got a sensible view somewhere in the middle, apart from here, of course, where I do. Because, you know, I don't attack people just because of who they are, or what they are, or, you know, what their politics are. Let's have a look at Keir Starmer this weekend as well. This is an old actual video, because it's a campaign video by Keir Starmer and Dan Norris, who's got himself into a bit of trouble over the weekend.
I'm here in Keynsham with Dan Norris, Labour's candidate to be the West of England mayor. The choice in these elections couldn't be clearer. The Conservative Metro mayor who's been invisible and failed to secure investment in the area, or Labour's Dan Norris.
And Labour's Dan Norris, wearing a mask there, has been accused of bullying and harassment by staff at the local authority. The accusations were made against Mr Norris in his role as the Mayor of the West of England. The authority has handed over hundreds of thousands of pounds to pay off former employees, apparently, and these details have emerged after Mr Norris was arrested at the weekend on suspicion of sexual offences against a girl, rape, child abduction and misconduct in a public office. So, of course, he's had the whip removed. It's an active case, so we won't go into it in any detail. It hasn't been charged with anything yet, but it's another bad look for Starmer, isn't it?
No, it can't not be, can it? And it's always going to raise questions about why wasn't this picked up on. There's always kind of signs that something might be going on, you know, in relation to poor behaviour or criminal behaviour. So that will naturally, understandably raise questions, even though, as you say, everything at this point is still alleged rather than proven.
Exactly right. A couple of other big stories around the state of the nation. A jihadi bride could be back in the UK. This is not Shamima Begum, but it's somebody who is living very close to Shamima Begum in a Syrian refugee camp. Apparently she suffered a brain injury when there was a missile strike of some kind, because she was there with her husband supporting ISIS, right? She's got a baby who apparently is now a child who looks after her, and there's some suggestion that the child, even though he was born in Syria, is a British citizen, which I don't get, and now there's talk of bringing the jihadi bride and the kid back.
No, it's incredible that we're still seeing stories like this running on and on when you've got people who are kind of clearly security risks, and yet these discussions are kind of blundered into. I mean, there is an ongoing problem with the fact that where a lot of the people who left the UK to go and join ISIS to fight with it, to
and there were
marry
hundreds of
into
them, by the way.
Absolutely. Because of the fact that they're basically being held by kind of Kurdish forces in the north of Syria. Obviously, we know what's going on in Syria at the moment. It's very unclear what their status in this new Islamist-led regime is going to look like. So the question, what happens with these people, is going to keep coming back, you know, even though, as you say, we've got to put our own security front and centre. And
the Shamima Begum story isn't over and done with yet either, because there's plenty of human rights lawyers who will consistently fight for her return, won't
they? And do we think that this Labour government are going to intervene you know, in the way that the previous governments did to try and stop that from happening? Probably not. So
probably not.
You know, we'll see how that one.
We should probably talk about front page of the Sun. Great story, exclusive. RAF Fury, Britain's Red Arrows display team may trade in its iconic fleet for Russian-designed jets. I mean, who comes up with this not madness?
You just think, also, you don't even need to be some kind of like PR genius to recognise that that might be a bad look. Like, you could have mentioned it to like any person you knew if you were working on this deal, and they say, do you think that right now in particular that's probably going to
while we're
sort
of trying to work out what to do about the war in Ukraine, trying to put pressure on Russia and all the rest of it. I mean, it just seems incredible, doesn't it? And also, you know, it may well be that they've got a reason to replace the jets because maybe they're a bit old. It may well be that there's a reason to use a new design. But, you know, of all the countries, you would go probably two countries, China, Russia, probably a no-no, I would say.
It would also be like, you could imagine what like the Russian propaganda media would make of all of this. You know, they claim that they're rearming, they claim that they're toughening up in relation to this, but they still have to use our designs and our kit. You know,
and also,
why would you hand them
we're
that?
constantly being told, are we not, that Russia's military is absolutely in decline, it's hopeless, you know, none of their tanks work properly, it's all really old, and now apparently they've got such a spanking new design that we're going to nick it for the Red Arrows. You know, again, you keep finding yourself saying, well, it can't be both stories, can it?
No,
either their military is decrepit and useless, or they're at the cutting edge of design. Which is it?
I'm sure anything is an improvement on the quite rickety sort of...
I mean, I'm surprised Keir Starmer, it says here, the team's Hawk TIs are due to be retired by 2030. Is that because of the green net zero targets?
Maybe.
So you're not allowed to fly around in a Red Arrow jet anymore.
You can only run on sunflower oil or something.
I mean, I had a conversation last week with a guy from Sustainable Aviation or something like that. It was the name of the company. And we were talking in sort of theory about how you know, in the future, all planes will be flying with sustainable aviation fuel. And I went, great, that's great. I said, how soon will that happen? Oh, it could be quite a long time. And I said, well, how long? And he was like, decades. I was going, why are we even talking about it then? You know, decades away. Most of the people having this conversation are going to be dead.
No, again, it's like if someone wants to beaver away, and this is the background, you know, if there's certain companies who think, you know what, if we crack this, we'll make a lot of money, so let's pour some money into researching and developing this. Even if government said, you know what, longer term, let's figure out how to do transport differently, whatever. It's absolutely fine. But the idea that it's going to happen tomorrow, everyone on all sides of that argument, whether you're an environmentalist or you're a bit more sceptical, as you and I am, it's obviously a nonsense, but we're expected to believe it's just around the corner in all situations. But
Tory shadow MPs and ministers are saying that basically this is tantamount to treason. Also, the cost of these new Russian jets would be £19 million. So why would we be paying Russia? I mean, sorry, it doesn't make any sense to me, but it's a great story nonetheless.
Absolutely.
We'll come back to you with more on the morning papers. There's a couple of stories that we haven't done yet, including a terrible knife incident of the weekend in West London, where a 16-year-old boy was stabbed to death. Another 16-year-old boy was arrested on suspicion of murder, and another 16-year-old boy was stabbed with non-life-threatening injuries. But there's a piece in the Times today saying young people who commit knife crimes should be forced to carry out some form of national service. That's from research into public attitudes. So maybe Britain isn't so bonkers after all. 6:31.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:33. I'm Mike Graham. Lots of people, by the way, over the last few days seem to have been in receipt of their bumper stickers. We did say you'd get them, and I know a lot of people are still waiting for them, and there will be more coming in the future. But if you haven't got yours over the course of the weekend, you might have to wait for the next batch. There will be another batch at some point. We'll be told exactly when that is. Got this from Gary in York. Morning, Mike. Many thanks for the car stickers. Arrived Saturday, put straight on the cars. Here's a couple of pictures, which is great. I'll post all these pictures on social media later. Tim from St Ives says, here's my bumper sticker. Not quite a bumper, but it's the best I can do. He's put it on the back of his motorbike, which is very, very good, very welcome indeed. And Tony says, net zero equals net stupid. The UK is being deindustrialised alongside Germany, lions led by donkeys. You do have to say, and Tom Slater's here, you know, this kind of rescuing of the car business is a bit little too late, isn't it?
No, absolutely. Like successive governments now, primarily the Tories with a lot of these targets, but not exclusively, have just been hammering our domestic industry. Like really, real kind of genuine, iconic brands of that, you know, put through the ringer, and now kind of at the last minute, like, well, we'll give you 5 more years on that target.
Exactly. And also they've been punishing people. You know, road tax has been doubled, I think, over the course of the last year, effectively. And if you've got a car that's new and you were paying, say, £400 tax on it last year, I think you're now paying £800 tax. You know, it's just for the privilege of driving it around. You know, they've managed to keep fuel prices relatively low, but every other thing, car insurance, you know, pothole damage, everything is costing drivers a long time. And for Keir Starmer to come out now and make out that he's the friend of the driver, when you've got low traffic neighbourhoods being introduced by every mayor that walks the earth, and generally Labour, and all sorts of things being done which are anti-motorist, cycling lanes, you know, bus lanes all over the place, and now two new toll tunnels opening up in London this week alone. making it very, very expensive. ULEZ zones, the whole thing. I mean, there's no way that they're the friends of the motorists, is there?
Not in the slightest. I mean, even suggesting that this is about replacing existing cars with electric cars is a bit of a misnomer. They want people to use cars less, full stop.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why they're disfiguring our cities in this way. That's why they're making it so incredibly difficult. And I think this is another classic example where the fact that MPs are either spend most of their time in London, get really confused. The vast majority of passenger journeys are still, was it like 70, 80% are by car.
Yes.
Like it's in the across the country.
Well, because the railways are so
work.
expensive now. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day who was trying to get from somewhere, I think it was from Manchester to London, and they were being asked to pay something like £600 return.
It's insane.
It was just ridiculous. It was like, if you don't book it in enough time, if you're not standing on one leg and holding a newspaper in your right hand, you know, you have to pay the full fare. It's some ridiculous amount of money to travel around in this country by rail, by public transport. And of course, a lot of places don't have any public transport.
No, exactly.
You know,
they have to drive. That's how you get around. So like when there's this kind of idea that we can sort of pivot away from the motor car, like it's just that those days are over. It doesn't make sense.
And you have this kind of, you know, 20, what is it, the 15-minute city thing where you just rent a car when you want one. You just get one of those zip cars, just jump in it and drive it and then leave it somewhere like a scooter. I mean, just ridiculous. Let's talk about something a bit more serious though, which is the knife crime business, because of course last week everybody was getting the knickers in a twist about Adolescence, you know, this fictional drama on Netflix, which Keir Starmer now wants every single school in Britain to show to its pupils, and everyone sensible was saying, well, it's all very well having a summit about a fictional drama. How about you have a summit about the actual reality of life, which is not some random white kid who's come from a good family who's suddenly killed one of his fellow pupils at a school because he doesn't like women, right? How about this? Metropolitan Police has detained 2 teenagers on suspicion of murder after a 17-year-old Kieran Charles was stabbed to death in West London in the middle of the afternoon near a place called Shepherd's Bush. If you're familiar with London, you know where it is. Incident took place near Old Oak Common, which is, funnily enough, where HS2 is supposed to be coming in. Welcome to London. Oh, look, there's somebody getting stabbed. 2 people stabbed, 1 died, 1 managed to survive. But the kids arrested were also of the same age, 16, 17. You know, it's just incredible, isn't it?
No, it is. There's just a real unravelling going on out there, and there's a certain point at which the failure to deal with knife crime in a city like London, because of the fact that the victims are disproportionately black, let alone the perpetrators as well. There's a certain point where this amounts to a form of like racist negligence, like we don't really care about this issue.
Or you can't say it because it's a bit embarrassing and everybody feels a bit uncomfortable about it.
Yeah, exactly. It will make politicians feel uncomfortable, so therefore we should allow this situation in which you've got kids in our own cities, in our own communities who are killing each other over basically nothing. Like, there's not a lot of these things seem almost disconnected from the kind of more traditional forms of, you know, gang crime or the drug trade or whatever. It is just really stupid slights which are escalated to another extent when everyone is carrying a knife. It just makes every interaction, every spat much more dangerous. The inability of certainly Labour, but the Tories as well, to take this issue seriously because they were terrified of what people in North London might think about this issue if it was talked about in too much depth, is, as I say, it amounts to a form of negligence, really, on a really grim and profound scale. It really does.
And in the Times today, they've got the Times Crime and Justice Commission banner over this one. It says the public actually believes that young people convicted of knife crime should be forced to carry out some form of national service, according to quite an in-depth research into attitudes. I think that's an interesting point, because I think everybody realises that it's going on. The government doesn't like talking about it, but at some point or other they'll have to do something, won't they?
No, absolutely. And, you know, any suggestion to not only just deal with the kind of immediate problem of why they're carrying these knives, how can we create disincentives away, how can we create a situation where people are more scared to carry one because they fear that, you know, if they're caught, that it's going to have serious consequences. But also addressing, as I think this proposal is driving at, which is there's obviously a more profound issue here with young kids not having that sense of direction, maybe not having the structure, maybe not having a father in the home and so on and so forth. Now that leads them more likely towards this kind of nihilistic behaviour than otherwise would be.
Absolutely right. A couple of other stories to talk about, including the BBC in trouble once again over pandering to the Muslim cause. But before we go anywhere else, let's have a look at what happened in France over the weekend. This is Marine Le Pen, who of course was ruled to have been in breach of electoral law and has been banned basically from standing in elections for the next, I think, 4 years. She's going to appeal it, but there was a big rally at the weekend, and this is the French supporters of Marine Le Pen singing a national anthem. Check it out. Vive la France at the end of that, like the line in Casablanca. But it's, I mean, extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, these people are not going away, no matter what the sort of, you know, the bods of the European Union think, you know, the kind of the people that hate the rise of the right wing in Europe, you know, that is a very strong signal that they are not going anywhere.
And this was always bound to happen. We saw what happened with Donald Trump in the US. I mean, his campaign for the presidency again was sort of in the doldrums until they started trying to lock him up by any means necessary. And that
and now he's in the White House.
Exactly, with that photo framed on the wall, as I understand it. So it's one of those things where this attempt to try and weaponise the justice system or bring in laws which prohibit candidates from standing, it's all just going to look like an anti-democratic stitch-up to their supporters. It's also, I think, particularly in relation to France, one of the hurdles that National Rally has always struggled to get over is the fact that it continues to be led by Le Pen. Marine Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, vicious anti-Semite and so on. She's gone on this attempt to detoxify the party, which a lot of people are still a little unconvinced
with some success.
Well, but I think the one thing that could be an interesting unintended consequence is if you do take her out of the picture and it's Jordan Bardella or someone else, one of the other kind of junior ranking people, just the absence of that surname might get a few more people over the line. So these sorts of tactics always backfire on the very establishment that use them, I think.
Well, I think any political organisation or government that uses the law to try and limit the ability of its enemies or its foes, if you like, or it's just opposition to get anywhere politically, it's always a failure because you can't use, you know, what are effectively undemocratic means to defeat democracy.
People don't like it. They don't like their choices being taken away.
I'd rather have the choice to vote for these people or not, rather than you telling me that I'm not going to be able to do so.
No, absolutely. You know? I don't know why they keep doing it, but they keep failing to learn this lesson, and it's going to keep happening across Europe.
And similarly, and of course, you watch Labour, and they're doing the same with reform now. They haven't quite said they should be locking people up, but they're relentlessly critical of, you know, people like Nigel Farage over the NHS, for example, saying, you know, he wants to privatise it, he wants you to have to pay to have your appendix taken out. You know, they just keep rattling this kind of ridiculous drum, which is having the complete opposite effect, and because people don't have any faith in the government, I'm afraid.
No, absolutely.
Let's talk about the BBC. They've been blasted for describing Muslim converts as reverts. Now, this is another controversial word, which is used apparently by Muslims who believe that everybody was born a Muslim, and therefore if you decide to convert to becoming a Muslim, you're not actually converting, you're reverting. The BBC actually adopted this word, used it throughout a news article about Eid, right? And Tory MP Tom Tugendhat says calling converts reverts is ideology, not fact. It's Islamist propaganda and has no place on the BBC.
I mean, they're absolutely bang to rights on this. You know, it's not as if Tom Tugendhat is some kind of trenchant right-wigger.
He's really not.
But this is obviously ridiculous. If you've got the kind of, again, the sort of language of sort of Islamist ideology creeping into how the BBC talks about things. You know, we wouldn't tolerate this with any other religion. So why has this?
And why do it? And then you just start asking yourself, well, who in the BBC is pushing for this? You know, what sort of maniac is saying we must change the way that we use these words? Like, with the same reason we can't call Hamas a terrorist organisation. You're now going to tell people who convert to Islam as reverts? It's completely bonkers.
No, it's completely bonkers. But it's one of those things where so many times the BBC, in its sort of reporting in those kind of magazine-y pieces they have on the website, just how much of that is just being kind of captured by ideologies of one form or another. It's either constantly about, you know, some kind of wing of the LGBT movement, or it's some of these things. Like, just the way in which they're just populating their own website and reporting the news now is often potentially on the basis of the journalists involved, I'm sure, just allowing ideology to come in all the time.
It really is. And just to be real about some of the things that are going on, an alliance of pro-Russian and pro-Palestinian hackers is launching cyber attacks every week against British organisations and state agencies, including the armed forces, security services and infrastructure operators. I remember when the Heathrow power went out, everybody thought, was this Russian hackers? Well, it now turns out we've got pro-Palestinian hackers doing it as well. So that's even more worrying.
No, absolutely. And this is going to be more... we're going to see much more of this in the years to come, where you're going to have this as a much more established kind of weapon of war, I guess. I mean, it's already been happening. I mean, the number of kind of hacks that have taken place on our public services, infrastructure and so on. Not least because I think a lot of the public sector in particular is very poorly defended against a lot of this stuff. People don't really understand it. Security is often quite lax, but it's something that is only going to grow, so especially as AI kicks off and all the rest of it. So surely something that should be taken much more.
You would have thought so. Coming up, we're going to talk about a great many other things, including Angela Rayner, who's in trouble with the left wing of her party and her union backers, believe it or not, because she's basically appeared to take the side of Birmingham City Council in the row over the rats the size of cats bin strike thing that's going on. Also, we're going to talk about 5 years after the first lockdown, people are still being dragged through the courts for alleged breaches of the law during COVID, believe it or not. We'll come back with more. Tom Slater's here. We'll see you in a minute.
Harry and Meghan have never actually worked in their lives. But fancy picking on a black female, which Harry has just done, given, as you've laid out, all of what's gone before us, accusing the royal family of racism, but of course very cleverly not saying who, so that the thing would fester and fester. So it has come back to bite them. But where we shouldn't be surprised is, don't forget, Harry, this is the individual that years ago was photographed wearing a Nazi uniform.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. 6:49 is the time. We're here all the way through until 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning. Mike says, Dennis, putting knife thugs in the army where they can brush up on bayonet practice and learn how to kill people may not be the best idea. I disagree with that, actually. I think I've seen a lot of young offender institutions in different countries, particularly in the US. They used to do a kind of boot camp style place for kids to go if they were under the age of 18, and they would be sent to a sort of military, you know, disposition, if you like, and they were up at 6 in the morning, you know, running 5-mile races before breakfast, and you know, they all start, and the people who ran these things, they had a really, really good record of curing them from their criminal past and making sure that they didn't ever commit any more crime, and the recidivism rates were really, really small. And I think, you know, it's not about teaching people how, they already know how to kill people, they already know how to stab people. It's about teaching them that it's wrong, and I think that in that case national service could be a good thing.
No, absolutely, and give them that structure, that discipline, a sense of why, you know, a path that they could kind of continue on if they want to. All of those things are obviously very positive. So there's always a tendency, particularly in this country, just sort of dismiss any of these things as out of hand and old-fashioned.
I mean,
and,
we've got plenty of people on the streets killing each other, so they already know how to do that. This is not about teaching them how to do that. Let's get a voice note from Brian on the car business.
Morning, Mike. Brian Southend. Another week starting with more Labour sleaze and another stabbing. Starmer's deflecting it all by saying, "Oh, we're going to increase the time where you can have a diesel van by 5 years." You know, this country's a complete mess. This man's got to go because it's getting worse. Every Monday morning or every week starts with more sleaze and despair. You know, I'm losing hope.
Brian, listen, the sun's out. It's going to be really hot this week. It's going to be hotter apparently than Australia in Britain. According to there's another big plume of hot air coming, and not just from this studio either. COVID criminals still dragged through the courts 5 years after the first lockdown. This is on the front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning. Many people have been forced to engage in lengthy court battles to clear their names after being taken to court for supposed COVID breaches. Why is this still going on?
130 people in the past 6 months, they reckon, have been working their way through the courts. Especially,
it's insane, isn't it?
It is insane. Especially, you would think, this when we're constantly talking about how we've got no capacity in the criminal justice system, to be continuing to punish people because they had a few too many people around of a Thursday evening under lockdown. And also, in many cases, people who ended up being fined or were seen to have broken the regulations or the rules, it was often they didn't know, it was relatively minor. These weren't people who were really taking the Michael, as it were. And yet they're still being dragged through the courts at a time we say that the courts are completely ground to a halt. It doesn't make any sense
Also,
whatsoever.
if you remember back to when the story came out about Keir Starmer and the voice coach, do you remember the Metropolitan Police, I think, and other sort of, well, there was the CPS, came out and said, "Oh, this happened too long ago for us to investigate it." Well, in the light of the fact that ordinary people are still being dragged through the courts, I think that is the wrong answer, isn't it?
No, exactly. Keir Starmer's day in court.
I think we'd like to see him dragged through the courts, even as we speak, because, you know, how is it possible for somebody who is now the Prime Minister to be able to get off? It would suggest you might have some kind of two-tier system, Tom.
No, it would. I mean, or maybe one way out of this is if just Keir Starmer says we're going to wipe the records of anyone who was criminalised during those years. Amnesty for people who have had to pay those fines, repay those fines. That, you know, those £10,000 fines that they were given to students for having a house party. That's a life-ruining amount of money for someone at that age. This is, you know, maybe that's the way out of this. And then we don't have to deal with it.
And funnily enough, I've got this from Stuart, who's just reminded us as well, from Bradford. Regarding the COVID court issue, didn't the police say that, as it was a long time ago, they couldn't prosecute Starmer for his discrepancy during COVID, but Joe Public lock him up? Yeah, well, it brings us back to Lucy Connolly all over again, doesn't it? Who, of course, is locked up for 31 months, now no longer even allowed out to see her family and her children, who are quite young, and her husband, who I think is suffering from cancer, because she's such a heinous criminal that she might do a runner. I mean, it's unbelievable.
No, completely. And that's another thing, I think, as the months and years wash on, we kind of hear more about some of those cases where, in the wake of Southport, a lot of people were arrested and then pled guilty very quickly. We often didn't hear about
they were clearly
what
advised to
place.
do so. I mean, Liz Truss came out over the weekend, former Prime Minister, whether you like it or not, former Prime Minister, you know, and a voice of some authority, saying that, you know, it's time that they started letting these people out, particularly Lucy Connolly.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, as you say, often poorly advised, often they've just got a duty solicitor who's come in, might not be terribly clued up on this particular very knotty area. Because there's obviously not a lot of cases like this, which usually crop up.
There's not much case law, is there?
Yeah, so it's one of those things where I think, a lot of stories like this are going to come out in the wash.
Yeah, exactly right. Let's talk about the NHS, because a couple of things this morning. The front page of the Telegraph, an army of health workers will be sent door to door in a radical NHS scheme to tackle Britain's sickness crisis. I know this is Daily Telegraph. That reads like the opening paragraph of a Labour press release. You know, an army of health workers. We don't have an army of health workers. Half of them are off sick. There's not enough people in the hospitals, right? Where are they going to find this army of health workers?
Absolutely. And you know that whenever these things are kind of bigged up, it's always going to be just quite a poxy little scheme that involves, you know, knocking around to take people's blood pressure or whatever. I mean, it was like when they were talking about sending people into workplaces to give them, like, welfare motifs. Like, why wouldn't you want to be weighed at work with your friends? You know.
Yeah, whatever happened to that? That just kind of disappeared, didn't it?
And even if they did do it, you think, does anyone really believe this is going to single-handedly solve the the problem of the NHS or people being not as healthy as we might like them to be.
Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, on Friday convened a national summit on a 10-year plan, who basically said he saw some really encouraging signs that they could cut the numbers of frequent flyers filling up A&E departments. Well, people don't go to A&E departments because they're not feeling well. They generally go to A&E departments because they can't get a doctor and they've got something, quite critically wrong with them.
No, absolutely.
Or they've had an accident. People aren't just going to A&E to get some pills for a headache, are they?
No, completely. And like as we've seen, it's had to bear the brunt of other areas of the health service which have become very dysfunctional. And also, if people aren't getting their appointments, their treatments in a timely fashion, their health is going to deteriorate, and therefore they're going to probably show up in the hospital more often. So, let's just admit that what's needed here is a quite much more sort of radical root and branch change to make the health service actually function for people in the way it's supposed to.
Well, I mean, it doesn't work at the moment, right? No, it doesn't work at the moment. How is it going to work in, a new form where you haven't got enough people to do the old form? And this is a bit insidious, right? Under the model, a community health worker is allocated a patch of 120 homes, typically paying monthly visits to see if help is needed. So this is not even people coming to your house, going door to door because you've got a problem. It's them knocking on your door to see if you've got a problem. Well, that's not really going to work, is it? Also, can you imagine, in this day and age of scammers, you'll get all sorts of fake NHS workers knocking on your door, pretending to be NHS workers, showing you some fake ID, gaining entry to your house, and then nicking a load of stuff.
But also, the problem they have, most people have when it comes to health in the NHS, is they can't get an appointment, their screening keeps getting pushed back, their treatment keeps getting pushed back, their surgery keeps getting pushed back. That's the fundamental issue they want solved, not for someone to come up with some ridiculous door-knocking scheme or whatever it might be. So, again, it's all just distraction tactics, I think, a lot of the time.
And then the other one on the front of a Mail says 9 out of 10 GPs are calling for NHS prostate screening programme. Hundreds of lives could be saved by initial targeting of men at high risk. Well, again, all very well if you've got the GPs who are going to do the screening. Who's going to do the screening? You can't get a GP's appointment now, even if you've got prostate cancer. Never mind if you just want to be seen for, some reason because you think you're not feeling very well.
No, exactly. It just feels like it's always kind of one issue that's being fought after another, rather than actually, we all know that this, it's not as simple as one particular condition, one particular scheme anymore. Like, we need to have a much broader conversation about how we sort out this health service, because I think people are obviously very attached to the NHS, and particularly the fundamental principle of free at the point of use, which vast majority of places in the developed world have anyway in different forms. But I think people are starting to realise this really isn't good enough. Like, it's actually a bit of an insult to the British people that you should be expected to both pay for and then put up with a health service as dysfunctional as it currently is.
And because it's such a nanny health service now, in as much as they say, we can prevent so many more diseases if we catch them early enough, well, just do that then. Don't set up schemes to try and get people working in even more obscure areas. I mean, their argument is that prostate cancer is now more prevalent than breast cancer, and they say bringing in screening is likely to save hundreds of lives. Well, it may well be likely to save hundreds of lives, but they haven't got the GPs. It's just incredible. And apparently Keir Starmer's backing the Daily Mail's prostate campaign. Well, whoop-de-doo. I mean, what difference does that make to anybody?
Also, he is the Prime Minister. I mean, he can act if he wants to.
If he wants to,
It's not as if he's just obviously signed a letter.
Well, maybe you could take every single diversity, equity and inclusion officer in the NHS, get rid of them all, use that money to hire a few more doctors, because there are doctors who can't get jobs in the NHS because there aren't any, and then start with that.
Absolutely. Everyone would agree with that.
My favourite headline in the papers this morning, and actually I haven't actually got around to it, this is one that Motability cars linked to drug and sex crimes. We'll be covering this a bit later on in the show. Vehicles given to benefit claimants under the controversial Motability scheme have been involved in hundreds of crimes. Huh? It's brilliant, isn't it? And my other favourite one, I'm going to close on this, page 4, exclusive by Jason Groves. Reeves' budget disaster costs one job every 9 minutes.
I mean,
so
and it's only going to get worse, isn't it?
I'm afraid you've been on for an hour, so now we're going to have to let you go. Tom Slater, thank you very much indeed. We've got lots more to do. Morning, chap, says Lee in Essex. A great show. Disagree with national service. As a former soldier, I find it disrespectful and dangerous for those of us who volunteer and who want to be there. You may have a point. Lee says, keep up the common sense. Well, surely we could give these miscreants who have been found guilty of some kind of knife crime, put them in a separate place, or where they could be trained in some way, not as next door to you, not side by side with genuine, people who want to be in the armed forces, but in some way, shape or form, some form of national service. What can it be? And there must be something they can do. We can't just let them loose on the streets killing each other. It's absolutely unbelievable. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be talking about all the political stories of the day. This is Morning Glory.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 3 minutes past 7. It looks glorious out there. The sun is up. Easter holidays, by the way. So if you're thinking about something to do with the children, bring them up to London and show them around. And make sure they're wearing a stab vest, obviously, just in case they can run into some bad people up here. But it is a fantastic time of the year. Spring is definitely in the air. I know this is not going to be of much help to you, but the last guest but one, before Tom Slater, was Lizzie Clark, former jockey, of course, TalkSport pundit, TalkSport commentator on the racing. She gave us a tip for the Grand National, and it turned out it won. I know an awful lot of you took advantage of that, so well done if you did. And if you didn't, then you should learn from something about the predictions that we make on this show tend to come true. Even the horse racing tips are 100% correct. 0344 499 1000. Coming up in this hour, we're going to speak to Sunil Sharma, political commentator, host of the Rational Voices podcast. I'll be asking him about Keir Starmer's conversion over to being the friend of the motorist. This is despite the fact that the government is now putting on tariffs on the tunnels, right? Forget about what tariffs Donald Trump's putting on Britain. We are now being forced to pay to drive through London, not just a congestion charge, not just a ULEZ charge, not just a LEZ charge as well, but now a charge on the two tunnels that bring you into London from the north of the east side and from the south of the east side, the Blackwall Tunnel and a new Silvertown Tunnel. So you're going to be paying more money to drive in London than ever before. In the rest of the country, you're paying more money because you've got more road tax to pay. Tell me how much your road tax has gone up, and I bet you I can find somebody who can double it, because I'm pretty sure that the enemy of the car driver in this country is Labour politicians, whether it's Mayor Sadiq Khan, whether it's Prime Minister Keir Starmer. He's basically come out this morning and said, oh, don't worry, you don't have to get rid of your diesel car or your petrol car or your hybrid car by 2030. We'll give you until 2035 to get rid of it. Oh, and if you're a manufacturing company, you won't have to pay any more money to China because you've made too many electric cars and not sold them. Oh, no, you won't have to do that anymore. We'll make sure you don't have to pay China any more money, but you just still have to make more electric cars. It's completely bonkers. It's completely round the wrong way, and I'm afraid it's too little, too late for companies like Vauxhall, for companies like Jaguar Land Rover, and for other companies who have had to go to the wall as a result of this government's mad, crazy net zero policies. Let's get a voice note from Kitty.
Morning, Mike. Kitty from Kent here. I've got Miss Rayner here for you. Thanks, Kitty. Mark, I'm really upset. I think you're going to talk about me and say mean things today. And Uzi's really upset. Uzi's bringing in workers' rights today. And Uzi's like letting people work from home, and it's like really good. You can have all your meetings from home. But Mark, don't say mean things. It's really scummy. I don't like it.
Kitty on Angela Rayner, thank you very much indeed. Very good. A great impression to start the Monday morning with. We'll be talking about Angela Rayner, the Birmingham bin strike, because apparently she started to go against her union backers, which is a bit surprising. Also, the RAF want to bin off the Red Arrows and hire some Russian planes. What the hell is going on? This is Morning Glory. This from Kenny in Edinburgh. Morning, Mike. Lucy Connolly, nasty words, 31 months. Hugh Edwards, producing and sharing child pornography, 0 jail time, not 1 night. I'd love to hear Labour explain how this is not two-tier justice. And one from Sean in Gloucester. When will the loony left finally realise their policies are ruining everything from net zero madness to open borders? Surely even they are not that stupid to see it's not working and it's time for another approach. I certainly won't be giving up my diesel Mercedes because some moron says it's bad. Pillocks, says Sean from Gloucester. Well, this is the thing. I mean, does anybody know what will happen if, for example, they've now moved it to 2035, but say you get to 2035 and you're driving around in a petrol car or a diesel car or a hybrid car, whether it's a plug-in or not, and what are you supposed to do? Exactly what does it mean for your car's worth? Does it mean that if you're going to think about buying a car, because I said this several years ago, if I'm thinking about buying a family car for the next, say, 10 years, because people keep their cars for a long time, say you want to buy a car now, today, it's 2025, you're going to keep that car for 10 years, right? What are you going to do? What sort of car are you going to choose? How do you know what it is that the government wants you to do in terms of what they want to charge you, in terms of what taxes you're going to be paying, in terms of whether you'll get a tax break if you buy an electric car this week, but you might not get one next week? You know, for Keir Starmer, who's going to be making a statement today in the West Midlands about the car manufacturing business, what if everybody in the car business has already put themselves together for a plan that ends in 2030, so no more manufacture of petrol and diesel cars? And now they've been told, actually, you can continue to make them up until 2035. Well, they've already changed that view, haven't they? Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Let's have a look at some of the stuff we're going to talk about a little bit later on today. Angela Rayner up first, right? This is because the bin strikes, of course, are still going on in Birmingham. The Unite Union, we had them on last week, are talking about negotiating some kind of settlement. They say that Birmingham City Council are trying to make them work for less money. Angela Rayner, surprisingly, I think, upset the left of the Labour Party and the unions in the Labour movement yesterday by actually supporting the council.
Well, the bin situation in Birmingham is appalling, and I urge Unite to get round the table, and they can't be blocking lorries. The lorries that are going out, there is an agreement to make sure that those bins are collected, despite the dispute, have to be allowed to do their job. And I'm determined to work with the local leaders. I stand ready to support them. It is a local dispute, and the leaders are in control of that. But if they need me as Secretary of State, I won't hesitate to be on hand, and will support them in that endeavour. But I urge Unite to get round the table and to get the deal.
So a lot of people on the left now are accusing Angela Rayner of betraying her sort of her members, betraying the people who put her where she is, the people who have backed her all the way up to now to the point where she's Secretary of State in a Labour government, because of course she, amongst many Labour MPs, has been funded by the union movement for a very, very long time, and she now appears to be turning on them because she says she's now in support of the Labour Council in Birmingham rather than the people who are actually striking against them, which is not a position I'm sure she would have taken up were she in opposition. So she's been accused of being a bit of a turncoat, to be honest. Absolutely extraordinary. Let's go to a few calls because it's early in the week. Time to get some of your views on board before we get any further on. Let's go to Chris, who's in Epsom, wants to talk about prostate exam. Chris, very good morning to you.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Yeah, good, sir. What do you want to tell me?
Well, we've spoken many times on many different things, but this is really heartfelt. My father died almost 2 years ago to the day from prostate metastasized throughout his body cancer.
Right.
I looked after him for 11 months, so I watched him eat the cancer, eat him alive.
Yeah.
The thing is that they told him for 5 years that he had a small shadow on his prostate.
Right.
And they keep monitoring it. And whether you believe it or not, it is happening all over the world. The vaccines turned it into turbocharged cancer. That small shadow turned into metastasized cancer and spread throughout his body within weeks.
Really?
Of him taking the third vaccine. And the thing is that what I discovered through a Freedom of Information Act is that men over 75 don't get treatment for prostate cancer. He was...
what, on the basis that they're too old?
Yeah, it's a triage of cost effectiveness, and you've already had a good life. The thing is that he was 82
right.
when he was told he had a small shadow,
right.
And he never told me. It was 5 years on from that
right.
that I found out when I was not happy with what
right.
he's being told.
So by that time he was 80 what? 85, 86? 87. Right. Okay.
I went to the hospital with him and I met with the first urologist. And he started talking about a shadow.
Right.
And I said, what do you mean a shadow? He said, well, it's a shadow. We've been watching it.
Right.
I said, what is a shadow? And eventually he said, well, it's a little cancer. I said, so deal with it. Don't watch it.
Yeah.
And he said, okay. But I then got a second urologist involved. And unfortunately, it was too late for my father. But on the day that my father died, right, April 19, 2023,
yeah,
I phoned my best mate I've known since I was a teenager, and I said to him, "I'm sorry, tell you, Dad's gone." And he said, "You ain't going to believe this." His father, who's 2 years older than my father,
yeah,
he'd just been diagnosed with the same.
Right.
And I found it really difficult, and that's why I did the Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah. I mean, what people say, and I've heard this many a time, Chris, and listen, thanks for your story and your call. I'm sorry about your dad. A lot of people say that most men will die with prostate cancer. That's something that the NHS says. If you reach the age of 85 or 90, there's a pretty good chance that at some point or other you will get it. But, of course, this is not what the government are now saying. The government are saying that they would like to introduce some form of prostate screening, which may well be a good idea. It's a question of priorities, isn't it? It's all about whether or not we've got the ability to do it. Let's talk to Alan, who's in Shropshire, wants to talk about farmers. Alan, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Good to be on the show, mate.
Good to hear from you, sir. What can you tell me?
Oh, right, here we go. The government now, they're going to have another swipe at the farmers. Here, I'll read you the excerpt.
Go on.
We currently have 30 exciting field-based veterinary opportunities to join our Field Delivery England team in one of the above locations. These veterinary roles involve a wide range of work, including responding to incidents and outbreaks of animal notifiable diseases.
Right. So
it looks as if we're going to have another case of foot and mouth starting in about 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, is it a seasonal problem, this?
No. The last one was in 2002. That was exactly the same.
Right. Was that when they burned all the carcasses?
That's right, because the government in November, I think it was November 2001,
right.
They went around all the places where they could get the railway sleepers. They ordered them all in, and foot and mouth started in January 2002.
Right, okay. So when are you saying it's going to start this time then?
I don't know, ask your guest, because talking to various mates, they said they put the marksmen on standby, and now they're.
I remember a few years ago I was on holiday in Devon and there was a TB outbreak amongst cattle. Do you remember that?
Oh, TB. Yeah, well, TBs with the badgers, that's entirely different. They haven't got to be killed.
Yeah, but no, but it's a notifiable disease, though, isn't it? And they do have to be killed if they get it.
Oh, yeah, it's a notifiable disease.
Yeah.
But they're going to be having TBs rampant in Britain.
Yeah, because I remember I was staying on a farm, right, and we were locked into the farm because the TB people were coming to test the cattle, and they'd found something, and they were like, "You can't leave." I was like, "What do you mean you can't leave? They wouldn't let me out the house."
Yeah, well, with the TB, they test every animal on their farm, every cow and calf, well, every cow, and then if it's a reactor, they'll send it off.
Yeah.
But,
no, true. Well, listen, let's keep an eye on it. Let me know if you keep us engaged, Alan. If you hear any more, let us know. Thank you very much indeed for that. Alan's a bit worried there's going to be another outbreak of foot and mouth. Who can say? But it's always wise to keep watching these things, to keep sure, to make sure that nobody is pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. One from Carl in Shrewsbury says, "Great show, Mike. Why does Comrade Keith Stalin want adolescents shown in schools to highlight the dangers of young white males, yet he doesn't want 3 girls shown," which was based on the harrowing real-life tale of Muslim rape gangs and young white girls in Rochdale. If you get any Labour MPs on, please ask them. It would be great to see them squirm over that. Yeah, well, we don't get Labour MPs on very often. I mean, we had them on, we had 2 on in 1 week. Which is the first time ever, and we haven't done any back since. Here's one from Kev in Shropshire. "Mike, as Jones in Dad's Army said, they don't like it up 'em. The EU don't like other countries treating them how they treat everyone else who isn't in the club. Correction time, I'm glad to see." And that's all about the tariffs as well. And Margaret in Yorkshire says, "Mike, just wondering about the 2 Labour MPs refused entry to Israel. Who paid for their travelling costs?" Well, that's a very good question. Probably us. And one from Margaret, who says, "Just got my bumper sticker." Thanks, Mike. And there's a lovely picture of it on the back of her silver car. There's plenty for us to do here. There's loads of stories to go at. Lots of you have got things to say. We're going to talk about NHS going door to door in order to try and find people who might need some help. But the trouble is, it's so ill thought, this idea from Wes Streeting, that they're going to be sending community sort of representatives, whether they be nurses or doctors' assistants, they won't be doctors, around to your house even before you've asked them to come and visit you, to ask you if there's anything you need. Well, that's ridiculous. Absolutely, utterly mad. And we'll be talking about Keir Starmer, who now makes out that he is the driver's friend. He is the friend of the motorist. Do me a favour, matey, pull the other one. 17 minutes past 7.
I tweeted out that she should be freed. She is clearly a victim of two-tier justice.
She spoke of mass deportations and setting fire to
what she
asylum
tweeted was wrong. It was vile. But she realised that in the heat of the moment, she took it down 3 or 4 hours later and apologised. She is the victim of two-tier justice, and I just think it's wrong. And I've tweeted out, of course, she should not be in prison for this.
Okay.
You know, whether it's community service or whatever, learn your lesson, but frankly, it's appalling.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:20. Very, very good morning to you. It's Morning Glory. It is Monday, April the 7th, which is famous and infamous for many reasons. One, guess what? It's going to get a lot more expensive to live in this country. It's going to be a lot more expensive if you run a business. It's going to be a lot more expensive if you drive a car. It's going to be a lot more expensive if you go shopping. It's going to be a lot more expensive if you use any electricity whatsoever in your house. It's going to be a lot more expensive if you actually have a house that you pay council tax on. It's going to be a lot more expensive in general for the month of April and beyond. And I'm afraid Keir Starmer this morning trying to make out that he's the mate of the motorist, that he's the man who's going to save us all going down the road because he's going to stand up to Donald Trump's tariffs and he's going to make the motoring industry a safer haven. I'm afraid I'm not buying it. Are you? 21 minutes past 7. Tell me what your road tax has gone up to, because I need to hear the numbers. I'm pretty sure mine has doubled, and I'm pretty sure lots of other people's has doubled as well. Let's get a voice note from Judith on knife crime.
Hello, it's Judy from Altoffs, West Yorkshire. This government is so devoid of ideas. It's just tinkering around at the edges, be it the health service or knife crime. So they're wanting these kids that's going around with knives to join the army. No, they'll be dangerous that turn on their own if they join the army. They're absolute idiots. What they need to do is just bring a law in. You get 5 years in prison if you're found carrying a knife, and tell the police to hit the ground running on stop and search. There's over 10,000 foreign prisoners in our jails. If Yvette Cooper pulled a finger out and deported them all, that would leave 10,000 spaces for these kids that go around trying to knife folk. Thank you.
Very sensible, Judy. Thank you very much indeed, as ever, for your thoughts. Listen, Keir Starmer has already threatened to get rid of all of these foreign criminals. He's already said, did he not say some weeks ago that he was sending crack teams of people from the border force in to get these guys out of UK prisons onto planes and flown back to from whence they came? But of course, like many things that Keir Starmer promised he would do, he hasn't done it. He got a few out on the first flight and then said, yeah, well, look, we're deporting more people than anyone has ever deported in the history of deportation. It turned out it wasn't quite true, I'm afraid. Gary says this: the UK is committing sympathetic suicide. We sympathise with every cause and give national financial support, draining our national resources. Eventually, we will exhaust our financial resources. Well, I think that may well be true. And Celia says self-defence classes and stab vests are reminders that they must be aware of where they are and who's around them. You shouldn't be on your mobile phone. This generation of youth have to deal with this themselves. Well, I mean, you shouldn't have to worry about coming into a place like London and be concerned that you're going to either be stabbed or mugged or have your phone stolen. Surely that is the responsibility of the law and order faction of the government to make it safer for people to walk around the streets. Surely that must be what they should be doing, shouldn't it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. Let us talk to Charles Feldman now, as US political analyst. Lots of people waiting for the opening of the FTSE this morning to see whether it's going to open down. A lot of people think it will. A lot of markets are reacting still badly to the tariffs that were announced by Donald Trump at the back end of last week. Of course, Jaguar Land Rover have said that they're going to pause shipments to the USA and wait and see what's going to happen. Let's have a look at what Donald Trump said overnight on the tariffs, particularly with regard to Britain.
We have been treated so badly by other countries because we had stupid leadership that allowed this to happen. They took our businesses, they took our money, they took our jobs, they moved it to Mexico, they moved it to Canada, they moved a lot of it to China, and it's not sustainable. We're not going to do it. Now we have hundreds of billions of dollars that's pouring into our country. On a monthly basis, it's pouring. It's already started because they put tariffs on. And eventually it's going to straighten out, and our country will be solid and strong again.
Donald Trump insisting that, we should hang tough, basically, and he will deliver historic results with his tariff plan. And certainly the UK, supposedly, particularly when it comes to cars, has responded by saying that we're going to make it easier for car manufacturers in this country to be able to sort of allay the fears of tariffs causing them to sell fewer cars in the United States of America. Let's talk to Charles Feldman over in the US of A and find out what's going on. Charles, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I see you had a weekend of a few demonstrations against Donald Trump. What was that all about?
Well, actually, this is the first time since he was reelected that we've had pretty large-scale demonstrations in something like 1,000 or more spots all around the United States. Granted, many of them were just, small groups of people, but in some places like New York City or where I am here in Los Angeles, the crowds were pretty large. And these are people who are objecting not only to the tariff situation, but to some of the other policies that the Trump White House has instituted since he has been back in the White House. So whether or not this is going to intensify, that really is kind of the key question. But, Americans are, to a large degree, they're taking these tariffs, and I think rightly so, Mike, personally, and I'm going to give you a very personal account of that. I checked just yesterday my own retirement account.
Yeah.
And in the past 6 days, it has lost about $20,000 in 6 days.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the trouble is when stock markets move, people sometimes forget that an awful lot of pension funds have an awful lot of money in the stock market. What I would suggest to you is that you get yourself more broadened out so that you don't get hit so badly. But this does happen. Luckily, you're young enough to recover it before you have to retire, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean that is the short-term hit that people have to take. I mean, I and I'm generally in favour of what Donald Trump's doing. I went to sort of move some of my money around a little while ago and discovered that since he'd been in, there'd been quite a significant loss to some of the money that I had in a pension. But the guys that know about these things always say that the money always comes back, and there's somebody making money every time the stock market goes down, and there's somebody making money every time it goes up. I mean, I guess the bigger problem for certainly Europe and for other countries around the world is what happens if sales start to taper off. Jaguar Land Rover has said that they're not now going to send any cars to America for a while. But the trouble is, for a long time in this country, car manufacturers have had to rely on selling cars in places like America because cars in America for UK buyers are actually an awful lot cheaper. Jaguar will sell you a car for a lot less money than they'll sell the same car to me in the UK. And Donald Trump has made this point. He made it at the weekend that if you want to buy an American car in Australia or a Harley Davidson in Australia or in Europe, it costs an awful lot more money than it does in America, like by sometimes a factor of 100%.
Well, that's very true. But the thing about these tariffs, Mike, is that if you take the whole issue of retirement funds, what we started talking about, and just take that off the table for the moment. The other issue, of course, is that very few economists do not think that these tariffs, if they are sustained long enough, and that's the key, if they're in place for a protracted period of time, that it won't lead to a higher cost of living. It is just inevitable. And that's not just in the U.S., it's where you are in the UK.
Oh, sure.
It's, all over the world. And that's something that a lot of American voters, mainly people who voted for Donald Trump, are now starting to wonder about. Because remember, he was elected primarily by Americans who were upset about their own economic standing. They were upset that they would go to the grocery store and prices of food were pretty high, price of autos was high, and they voted for him on his promise. And he did promise this, Mike, that on day one, he said. Now, that obviously was hyperbole, but he did say that on day one, all of this was going to be rectified, prices are going to come down, and that is not what is happening. And if these tariffs do not go down substantially in a short period of time, most economists that I know say that these prices are not only going to keep going up, but they will go up higher and higher and higher, and that inevitably can lead to a recession. And that's the main fear, is are we headed for recessionary times?
Yeah, no, for sure. And everybody will agree with that, because every economist will talk about the medium to long term. And I mean, I take a view that with Trump, it's always wait and see. You know, see what happens tomorrow, because tomorrow everything could change, you know. And he himself has said, and members of the administration have said, you know, they're already seeing certain countries around the world reducing all of their tariffs on US goods. They're already seeing, you know, some people kind of doing what they want them to do, if you like. And for Britain, certainly, Seb Gorka was on Newsnight the other night talking about how it's all a negotiating position, and so you can negotiate your way to a better deal. And that's kind of what sounds like he's doing to me.
Yes, but there's a fundamental flaw in his logic that some people have already pointed out, and that is that when he put these tariffs into play, when he talked about putting them into play, his main rationale was that by having these tariffs, it would force American companies that have outsourced production to other places like Asia, for example, Southeast Asia, it would force them to bring their manufacturing plants back to U.S. soil. The problem is that if he goes ahead and he uses these tariffs, as the White House is suggesting he's doing, as a negotiating tool, then the question becomes, well, if it's a negotiating tool and other countries lower or eliminate their tariffs, which would then lead to the U.S. lowering or eliminating our tariffs, then what is the incentive for companies, U.S. companies, to bring manufacturing back to U.S. soil?
Well, if he gives them tax breaks, that would be one interpretation of that, and that's certainly what's happened with foreign companies as well. JCB are doubling the size of their plant in Arizona as a result of what's currently going on, and that's a British company who are doing it. And I read a really interesting piece of the weekend about Tim Cook and Apple, about how Apple, because of the fact that they worried about tariffs on China, they moved an awful lot of their production out of China into places like Vietnam and Cambodia, and they're now thinking maybe that wasn't far enough. Maybe they should have brought them back to the US of A. So you can change corporate behaviour if you start squeezing them a bit, and I guess that's where he's coming from.
Yeah, but you know, there's an interesting thing that's also happening in this White House now. There is a division between one of his key economic advisors, Peter Navarro, and Elon Musk. Elon Musk is not a fan, and that's an understatement, of tariffs. He's very critical of tariffs. And he's been very critical of Peter Navarro, who is, again, one of the key economic advisors to President Trump, to the extent that there is, you know, a bit of a verbal dust-up between the two, you know, using, you know, X, the social platform X as a platform, and also it's spilled over into some of the Sunday chat shows here in the U.S. So there isn't, you know, a uniform thinking in the White House.
But that's good, though, isn't it? Isn't that a good thing?
It is good. It is, except that, you know, Mr. Trump has painted Elon Musk as sort of this, I hate to use the phrase boy wonder, because he's certainly not a boy, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
He was...
but he'll just deny saying it, won't he? And he'll go, if he falls out with him, which he inevitably will, which everyone knew he would, he'll just go, well, you know, he was good once, and now he's not. Bye-bye. You know, it's how he deals with these guys, isn't it?
But what's interesting is that a lot of people who have been critical of Musk for some of the things that Musk has been doing, you know, namely spearheading the effort to really greatly reduce the U.S. federal government, are now praising Musk. So it shows you how things have been changing in this country in a rather rapid.
I know it's kind of amusing to watch. It wasn't costing everybody quite so much money. But listen, Charles, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. I hope your pension fund bounces back. Charles Feldman, US political analyst there. Let's get a quick voice note from Andy.
Morning, Mike. Andy, in a very sunny South Sea today. Looking forward to this afternoon when I finish work, sitting in the garden, couple of drinks, blah blah. Just a quick one on the old prostate situation. Well, once you hit 50, you are actually entitled to demand a blood test, you know, to get tested for prostate cancer anyway. So, yeah, I would urge any man, if they're listening, you know, if you're 50 or over and you haven't had a prostate exam, just get it done. I think they can do it with just a blood test anyway, so it's worth doing, I think. So keep up the great work, Mike.
Good to hear from you, Andy. Thank you very much indeed. Lots of plans coming up in the next couple of hours. We're here, of course, till 10 o'clock. Next, we're going to speak to Richard Holden, Shadow Paymaster General. He's live on College Green in Westminster. It's a beautiful Monday morning. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:36. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until, of course, 10 o'clock. We've got a quick one here from somebody who doesn't actually give a name. We run a little wedding... Oh, it's Alex, sorry. We run a little wedding car business. We've already had the crap kicked out of us by this lot. Now our road taxes have gone through the roof. For example, one of our 35-year-old Rolls Royces, which does at the most 900 miles a year, is now just on £800 a year road tax, and that's just one of our cars. Even the smaller ones have had a similar jump in prices. Yeah, I want to hear from you this morning on road tax, because Keir Starmer's painting himself as this friend of the motorist, which I'm not buying, to be honest. Let's talk to Richard Holden, MP, Shadow Paymaster General. He's down on College Green for us right here in London. A beautiful sunny morning. Richard, very good to see you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good to see you, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed. Are you buying this new, newly sort of unveiled Keir Starmer, the friend of the motorist, this morning?
I don't think anybody should be buying that. I've got Ford's UK HQ in my constituency over in Basildon and Billericay, and they're certainly not buying it. Under this Labour government, we're seeing job losses there at Ford because of several things. One of them, obviously, that massive national insurance tax hitting right across the entire automotive sector, costing them around 200 million quid a year. We've not seen any security around the future of the small van plug-in grant, a massive issue for when the government are still telling people they have to go electric, but then they're not going to provide that long-term support to do that. We've seen the extra tax on twin cabs really hammering some of the only profitable parts of our car industry, people paying thousands of quid a year, particularly those in construction businesses. So we're seeing right across the board people being hammered. And then today we're seeing that national insurance costing around local councils around £1.2 billion a year. That's going to mean they're going to have to cut that cash from somewhere because the government isn't providing the support needed to meet that difference, and we all know where that's going to come from. That's going to come from your local highways budget, meaning an extra 15 million potholes aren't going to be filled every year under Labour.
Well, this is right. I mean, there's a story about that in The Sun today. Also, you know, the plan to allow drivers to buy petrol and diesel vehicles until 2035. I mean, presumably Ford and other manufacturers have already been working on the previous deadline, so this really doesn't help them, does it?
Well, it's quite schizophrenic from the government, right? They say, you know, Rishi had already moved under the last government this back to 2035. Ed Miliband and Keir Starmer come in and say, no, we're going to have it at 2030. Now there's this talk about maybe it moves back to 2035. We don't know if it'll include all vehicles. We don't know if it'll include commercial vehicles. We don't know if that's going to include any form of grant support, for example, for the vans. We just do not know at the moment. These sort of rushed last-minute announcements when we can see this Labour government absolutely hammering our automotive sector with £200 million of national insurance rises a year, right? That's a year. It's starting yesterday, right? And now they're scrambling to try and fix it because, you know, we've already seen that Stellantis jobs go in Luton. We're very worried about other parts of the country and job losses in the automotive sector as well.
Yeah, exactly. And also, without wishing to sound too London-centric, this is the day, Richard, as you probably know, that 2 toll tunnels now open up in London. One of them, the Blackwall Tunnel, the older tunnel, which never had a toll on it, or at least hasn't had for many years, and now the new Silvertown Tunnel, which is going to put even more pressure on local business, on small business, on people who need to drive for a living. You know, it's absolutely outrageous.
Well, a lot of my constituents from Basel and Billericay, tradespeople, will be coming into London on a daily basis. You know, they've already been hammered by the congestion charge and the expansion of that ULEZ zone. That's been a real killer for a lot of them, and now they're going to have to be paying this as well. I think this is genuinely, I think the Mayor of London, who's been a Labour Mayor for a long time, seems to be, all he wants to do is really cripple our capital city, whether it's the nighttime economy on one side, you can see it yourself if you go out in an evening in London, or on the other side, all of these things which are really just driving up costs for Londoners across the board and really hammering business at the same time.
Absolutely right. Let's talk about the 2 Labour MPs who were not allowed to enter Israel at the weekend, Yuan Yang and Abtisam Mohammed. Your leader, Kemi Badenoch, came out yesterday in support of Israel. Let's have a look at what she said to Laura Kunsberg.
If you look at the reasons why the Israeli government has given for why they're not letting them in, they don't believe that they're going to comply with their laws. MPs do not have diplomatic immunity. I believe that the people who represent us in Parliament should be people who should be able to go anywhere in the world and people not be worried about what they're going to do when they go into those countries.
Are you suggesting the Israelis were right to worry that these 2 Labour politicians would break the law if they got into the country?
Well, that's the reason they gave. And what I believe is that every country should be able to control its borders. We do the same thing. There are many people that we don't allow into our country, and I don't think we should be setting precedents in a different way.
So just to be clear, you believe the Israeli government's account of this, not the Foreign Secretary who says they were treated unacceptably?
The Foreign Secretary has given his view. I've given my view.
I happen to agree with her, Richard, not just because you're talking to me now, but, you know, quite ironic that David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, who called for the arrest of the democratically elected leader of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, on war crimes, if he ever came to Britain, is bumping his gums saying that, oh, of course they should be allowed into Israel. Well, it's not really his call, is it?
No, it's not. It really is the call of the Israeli government. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that people like Martin McGuinness and Jerry Adams were notionally UK MPs, and the idea that we'd be going around telling other countries they had to have people who are on the IRA's Army Council or affiliated to the IRA have to go into countries, I mean, that's just a nonsense. And the fact that some of these MPs have been not just critical of the stance of the current Israeli government, but critical more broadly and taken at face value anything that Hamas and their terrorist allies have said. I think, you know, Israel has to have a right to be able to decide who goes into this country, just like we would if, say, somebody from the Iranian regime rocked up on our border. We shouldn't have to take them just because they happen to be a member of the Israeli parliament, for example, or Iranian parliament, for example.
Absolutely right. Richard Holt, good to talk to you. Got to run. A Shadow Paymaster General there reporting into us from College Green in Westminster. One from Dave in Aberdeen says, morning Mike, maybe we could train courier drivers and delivery operators to do the medical checks. 2 birds with 1 stone. This is on the story that we were breaking earlier on from the Telegraph, that the NHS wants to send community nurses around to your house to see whether you need anything or there's anything wrong with you. door-to-door checkups, right? Sue from Chelmsford said, I don't want the NHS coming around my house to check my pronouns. Thank you very much. Yeah, very well said. And one from Karen, who says there is a reason why there isn't a national screening programme for prostate cancer. A PSA test, which is the blood test for prostate cancer, isn't definitive and can rise for different reasons. Prostate Cancer UK does a good summary of the pros and cons of testing. Be fully informed. If you have a family history of prostate cancer, you have an increased risk. Yeah, I think that goes for an awful lot of them. One from George, who says, Mike, as a survivor so far of a prostatectomy, I believe the policy for the elderly with enlarged prostate is to do nothing, as it's reckoned they'll die of something else anyway. Yeah, well, God bless the NHS. I mean, they come up with this kind of thing all the time, except for when COVID was going on, of course, because then they decided to shut down the entire country because they were worried about the effects that COVID would have on elderly and vulnerable people. But if you're elderly and vulnerable, generally speaking, in the NHS, they don't care. They just let you die because it's cheaper. 7:44.
Ended up in court, and a federal judge has said the United States has got to return him after he was mistakenly deported, deport him by Monday. So it's kind of interesting to see how that will play out, because of course Trump has gone really hard on these, you know, I'm going to be really tough on immigration. That was a really big part of his electioneering, was this immigration. I mean, tough on it, and he made like quite a big show, and it was televised, these people being deported all in chains and put in jail.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:47. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along. Raiden says this, either these folks, and he's talking about the two Labour MPs, are ill-informed simpletons who think they have an automatic right of entry into any country by virtue of being elected here, or certain countries get different reactions when they do likewise. And then he leaves an article about how China banned, obviously, senior British MPs, mostly Tories, I think all Tories actually, and Labour didn't say anything. Funny that, isn't it? Extraordinary times we live in. Mike, I agree with Trump. We could end up with no tariffs worldwide, says Susan. And on the subject of knife crime, Carol in Shoreham says, Mike, knife crime children should be made to erase graffiti and remove rubbish from our streets to try to restore some pride in our towns. This country can no longer be expected to have to live under these disgusting conditions. Get them working. And she says, thank you for all you do. I think it's time we did actually take some kind of, I don't know, civic pride in the country. I've said this before. We started a bit of a campaign here some weeks ago, before Birmingham even got as bad as it did, because we found out So much fly tipping is going on. So much horrible litter is being thrown out of car windows, out of lorries, you know, just into the streets, out of houses. People are dumping stuff on the front of their lawns and expecting somebody to come and pick it up at some point. You know, we need to really think about the state of our nation. That was the phrase that I used, and I think we'll revisit that over the course of time. We're going to speak to Philip Ingram, MBE, very shortly. Let's go first, though, to Gary, who's got a voice note for us.
Morning, Mike. It's Gary from Canterbury here. Hope you are very well this week. Listen, just in on the thought of prostate exams and all that, why can't we have Keir Starmer live on talkTV getting a prostate exam? That might give us a little bit of entertainment for the rest of the week. Anyway, have a good day.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Not my show, I don't think. I mean, he doesn't come on anyway. I don't think he's going to go for that invitation. Look, I know you don't want to come on the show anyway, but how about you come on the show and have a prostate exam? I mean, obviously, it now sounds like the PSA test, which some people think is a good way at least to start with. You could start with that. You know, I'm certainly not going to be recommending medical treatments to people because I'm obviously not a doctor. But I play one on TV, as they used to do over in America. Philip Ingram's here. Let's have a word with him. Amazing story that came out over the weekend, Philip. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Where apparently Brits have been told to prepare a 72-hour survival kit because Vladimir Putin plots to sabotage gas pipelines and cause mass blackouts. But before we get to that, let me ask you about the story on the front page of The Sun this morning, Red Arrows. This is another Russian-related story. Apparently, the Red Arrows are thinking of replacing their iconic fleet with Russian-designed jets, which sounds insane, doesn't it?
Well, it's completely insane. It's actually an Italian jet that has got some Russian design input to it. Right. But the Red Arrows, the Hawk T1s that they're flying are so out of date. You know, they're disasters in the air, with just an accident waiting to happen. And there's a number of different companies that are bidding to replace it. And of course, there's a defence review coming out. So I think this is probably a little bit of targeted lobbying that's managed to get onto the front page of The Sun to try and create a stir around it. Because, of course, with the defence cuts or the defence review and spending money, the Red Arrows with the controversy that they've had over the last couple of years, you know, have to be at the top of the list for potential cuts.
Yeah. Well, this is the trouble, isn't it? Because I was looking at some of the cuts going through the Metropolitan Police yesterday, because somebody sent me a document that I hadn't previously seen. And once you start getting into the areas that the defence and others are supposedly having to look at, you start to think, well, if you're building up your defences and you need to spend money better, there would be an argument, I guess, for people to say, well, what do we need the Red Arrows for? Yep. But I think they're actually, I mean, I've seen them a few times, and I'm not just talking about them flying along the Thames. I've seen them actually doing air displays, and they are tremendous. And surely sometimes you just need to have a pride in what you can produce as a British military. And I wouldn't want to see them disappearing, would you?
No, I wouldn't want to see them disappearing. We have to remember that we're there advertising British manufacturing capability, the Hawk aircraft, which we sold lots to Saudi Arabia and other countries. We don't make these aircraft anymore, and this is the real difficulty. And one of the companies that's mentioned in the article is a new British company, but again, in typical defence style, this new British company's got a fantastic design for an aircraft. It's never built an aircraft ever. So it's got no history whatsoever. Right. And that's going to go really well if you go and buy an aircraft from a consortium that's done that.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's got shades of the SNP in Scotland, isn't it? Buying ferries from companies that have never made ferries.
Well, exactly. So they might have got people who are experts in paper aeroplanes, but building the sort of jets that are needed, and the amount of money they want the taxpayer to pay for the development of it. Yeah. Unless the UK government, unless the taxpayer can get something out of it, there's no point. And this is I think just pre-defence review lobbying, and we'll see lots more of it until the defence review comes out.
Yeah, right. Going back to this story about a survival kit, I don't know whether you've got one, but according to this piece in the Mail, nearly 40% of the UK's gas supply is imported from Norway, much of which comes through a single pipeline, which is the 700-mile Langeled pipeline. That doesn't sound too secure to me.
No, it's not. Our critical infrastructure, undersea infrastructure, is not secure, and this is another story that's going around where the Russians are using that to put listening buoys on to try and monitor our submarines and our surface fleets that are protecting it. But the survival kits, the only thing I can say is I don't have one at the minute. I have all the elements of one if I need to, but as soon as I start putting it together and digging the nuclear bunker in my garden, I think everyone should get worried.
Yes, I would be certainly worried if you started doing it, but according to the Mail, here's what you need in your emergency supply pack. Non-perishable food, they've chosen Heinz beans, water bottles, a torch, identity documents, a Swiss Army knife, a battery-powered radio and a first aid kit. I mean, there are people that will read something like this and go, crikey, I better go and get that sorted out. I mean, we used to have those people in America, didn't we, who were convinced that there was going to be some kind of insurrection formed by the government. So they were going to build their sort of bomb shelters underneath the house in the basement where they had, 15 years supply of everything.
Yes, but in America, the survival kit goes on to have an AR-15,
yes,
100,000 rounds of ammunition, an M60 machine gun, and if you can, an M1 Abrams tank.
Right.
But it's actually sensible advice for people to have things that if there's an emergency, because if the Russians or anyone manages to come in and cut our gas supplies or power supplies, and we get power blackouts, and it's not beyond the realms of possibility, then having a torch in the house is a sensible thing. Food supplies, I don't think we're going to run out, but it's always useful to have tins of beans in the cupboard.
Yes.
And it's always useful to have a first aid kit, and Swiss Army knives. Other knives are available, I'm sure, but they are really useful, and I do have all of these elements around.
You probably can't get a Swiss Army knife now, though, because of the crackdown on knife crime.
You can get it. You'll just be arrested and thrown in prison for at least 6 years. But if you tweet about it, it'll be life.
Yeah, I mean, slightly more worrying is a piece of the Times this morning from GCHQ, who are basically saying that there's a pro-Palestinian branch of hacking and a pro-Russian branch of hacking who are sort of forming some kind of alliance to attack UK infrastructure and sort of electrical situations all over the place, and they're forming themselves into a kind of a compound, if you like, and so they're now almost every week attacking the infrastructure of Great Britain.
Oh yes, 100%, and then it's backed up by the Chinese as well. A lot of these groups, a lot of them are criminal groups, but they are under a level of state control because the state allows them to happen. The Iranians are really under state control. The Russians are hugely under state control. The Russians use criminal gangs and state effect, but we're starting to see this coalition of the willing coming together, not just in supplying each other with military capability, but in cyber. And there's an awful lot of cyber activity going on a not just a weekly basis, on a daily basis, and attacking our critical infrastructure and other potential targets.
Right. Well, when I said this earlier on the show, when Heathrow Airport blew up because the substation sort of went on fire a few weeks ago, it was thought that there might be some kind of involvement from a foreign player of some description. The police apparently said that wasn't the case, but they did send in the terror police. But you do get the sense that there's an awful lot of vulnerability around the country.
There's huge amounts of vulnerability. One of the advantages of being in the UK is the Russians look at it and go, oh, their stuff is so old that we can't get it through connectivity. It's going to destroy itself. And then whenever we do have things like Heathrow, again, there's not the same sort of disruption that there would be in a modern state because we're so used to things going wrong that we're so used to working out the workarounds. So again, it doesn't have the same effect. So being a country with such creaking infrastructure is no bad thing whenever it comes to trying to deter other countries from attacking. But there will be. They are on a daily basis probing to see where they can disrupt our attacks, whether that be our undersea pipelines, whether it be our railway networks, whether it be our power networks. The Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians and North Koreans are watching it very closely.
Indeed. One final one for you. It's a bit off the subject of defence, but there's a piece of the Times today with a survey that's been done about national public attitudes, and they say young people who commit knife crimes should be forced to carry out some form of national service rather than going to prison. As a military man, what do you make of that?
Well, it always used to be years ago, whenever a youngster was brought up in front of a magistrate, the magistrate would turn around and say, there's your sentence under the law to go off to prison, or you can go and join the army. And they'd be frog marched off to the army. And it's amazing how many regimental sergeant majors, you know, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s had actually come in through that route and turned out to be good citizens of the country. I think the one thing the country's lacking is discipline in society and a sense of belonging. The one thing the military would give people is that, but it would be difficult for the military to, because it's so short in resources, to try and provide that for the numbers of people that are going through our courts.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to talk to you. Philip Ingram, thanks very much indeed. MBE, former Senior Military Intelligence Officer. Let's get a voice note from Steve.
Good morning, Mike. This is Stephen Hartz. If Donald Trump's tariffs work and result in a localisation of manufacturing back to the United States, surely he'll be saving the world, because container ships bringing all their tap from China and India and everywhere else burn 300,000 litres of fuel per day per ship. So we'd be saving billions and billions and billions of litres of fuel a year by localising manufacturing. So why are the left squealing? Isn't that what they want?
Well, you would think so, Steve. An awful lot of conversations going on the left, which are confusing the hell out of all of them. They don't really know which end is up. Jules in London says, morning, Mike. Russian-made jets flying over Buckingham Palace. Not the best of looks, is it? Not really, no. Coming up in the next hour, Emma Tribble's going to join us. She's going to give us her views. Harry Cole's here as well. He's been to America, and everybody over there thinks that Britain has gone stark, staring, bonkers mad. Immigration out of control, and people getting locked up for Facebook posts. What is going on? We'll bring it all to you. This is Morning Glory.
I can announce this government.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us carry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10p, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60p. Great show.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. We've already done 2 hours. The sun is up. It's going to be really, really warm. According to the Daily Star, Easter sunny is what they've got on the front page. They reckon it's going to be, yes, another 2,000-mile wide, 24-degree heat dome this week. Although, to be fair, last week they said it was going to be 21. And it got up to about 17, 18, which was very nice, by the way. I haven't mentioned it much this morning, but I won the Grand National. Well, I didn't win it, but the horse that I backed won it, who was very happily, I'm happy to say, literally tipped on this show. Last Friday, we had Lizzie Kelly on from TalkSport, who used to be a jockey, and she tipped the winning horse. Absolutely remarkable stuff. Nick Rocket, and an awful lot of you, I know, backed it. I certainly did. And so now you know, as if you didn't need any further proof, that this is the one home where you come to for the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. The world of common sense lands right here in the middle of Morning Glory, and everything we say is going to happen does happen. It's as simple as that. And on the Trump tariffs, we say, wait and see how things go. Remember, it's all a negotiating position. Keir Starmer's panicking. Lots of other people in the world are panicking. The FTSE 100 has opened, falls 2.64% today. Lots of people are making money, by the way. It's down 202 points, roughly, on opening. Lots of other markets over the course of the weekend and over the course of overnight into Monday morning have opened down. But, of course, what you do know, and what I know about the financial institutions of this country and this world is that whenever the markets are moving, somebody is making money. Somebody's getting themselves a new Ferrari, somebody's getting themselves a new Lamborghini, and the prices will come back. If you're worried about losing money off your pension, don't worry, it will come back. And I say Donald Trump knows what he's doing. Coming up to very nearly 5 minutes past 8, Emma Trimble's going to be joining us. We're going to ask her about the bad weekend that Starmer had, because instead of now pretending to be just the friend of the motorist, what he really should be doing is wondering why 2 of his MPs have been refused entry to Israel because of their views on the Gaza conflict, and also why one of his MPs has had to be pretty much kicked out of the party and had the whip removed because he's been arrested on child sex charges. I think these are things which are perhaps more important than telling people they can keep a diesel car for an extra 5 years. 0344 499 1000. Also, the NHS wants to come and visit you. They want door-to-door policy of coming round to see if there's anything you need. So effectively, you wait in your own corridor instead of one of the hospital corridors for somebody to see. It's a mad idea. It doesn't work at all. Also, the Red Arrows, front page of the Sun. Some maniac has decided that they need replacing because the jets are so old. They're thinking of getting some Russian-designed ones. 9 Danker. Or whatever it is in Russian. That's German, obviously. 0344 499 1000. Also, have you seen the crowds for Marine Le Pen? They're not going anywhere. They're all singing the Marseillaise at the weekend. Flags everywhere. The French tricolour. Absolutely extraordinary scenes. The more you try to break the right wing in Europe, the bigger and stronger it becomes. This is Morning Glory, and let's get it on. One from Sean in Briglington. Used car values will rocket as the demand will be there, but sales of new ones will be banned. Barry says, morning, Mike. Ignore the rubbish about Labour banning new petrol and diesel cars by 2030. They'll be unemployed by then, and reform will reverse it. And Dave in Melton Mowbray says, morning, Mike. Great show as per normal. The government should give the British public the chance of a referendum on the net zero topic, but they won't because they fear the answer. All the best. Well, that's exactly right. They don't like giving us referendums, the Labour government, do they? Because the last time they went for that, they got it completely wrong, didn't they? 6 minutes past 8. Let's say a very good morning to Emma Trimble. Emma, nice to see you. Very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
It's a beautiful sunny day out there. It's a lovely sunny week. But if you're Keir Starmer, he's going to go up to the Midlands today to try and make out that he's now the friend of the motorist, even as, you know, Labour governments over the course of time, whether they're local or national, have absolutely buried motorists. They don't encourage you to drive a car. We've got more taxes on motoring now than ever before. We've got, you know, ridiculous amounts of money being charged for parking tickets, for speeding fines, for, you know, having the temerity to drive into London, and having now the temerity to drive under a tunnel in London, which they're going to cause you a toll. They're going to charge you a toll for. Are you buying that he's now suddenly the friend of the motorist?
No, not at all. And actually, if you look at the details, the press are reporting that he has loosened his net zero policies, watered down his commitments on electric vehicles. I mean, he has slightly, only in the sense that he's reduced the fine that gets imposed on companies that don't make enough electric vehicles or make too many petrol vehicles. But what he hasn't done is get rid of the 2030 ban on producing or manufacturing petrol and diesel cars. So actually, I mean, if this is watered down, it's watered down by a couple of drops. I mean, it's not really a significant change. And I always think that the wisest people that you could possibly talk to on any political issues are always black cabbies. And black cab drivers are always telling me how persecuted they feel, particularly in London. I know that's partly Sadiq Khan, but that's still the Labour Party. Labour is no friend of motorists, but it's not just about motorists. I don't drive. I'm very concerned about this. This is about our economy. This is about the future of this country. And it's about the fact that the Labour Party are putting these ideological net zero objectives above the overall well-being of the country economically, particularly going into all of this stuff with Donald Trump and tariffs and changes in the economic situation worldwide. It's clear that we need to be, getting rid of all of these luxury commitments that we've had for so long, and starting to behave like responsible adults who are thinking about future generations and the future of our country.
Well, exactly right. Because for huge swathes of the country, and you're fortunate, as I'm fortunate enough to live in London, where there's plenty of public transport and you don't need a car, but you can have one if you want one. But there's loads of parts of the country where if you don't have a car, you literally can't go anywhere. And I'm not talking about, the back of beyond. I'm talking about relatively, busy parts of southeast England where there are literally no buses that go anywhere, and the trains, if you don't happen to have a train station anywhere near you, you can't get around unless you've got a car.
Well, I mean, it really is inner London privilege, because even if you're just on the outskirts of London, getting a little bit closer to the M25, maybe you live in Havering and you're sort of bordering on the countryside, and never mind, where you live, if you're a tradesman and you need your vehicle for work. I've seen a few people lugging ladders and all sorts around on the tube during rush hour. But I've spoken to people who've said to me that, they can't use electric vehicles to carry their tools around, electric vans, because the batteries die so quickly that it's not viable. It's not profitable for them to have to keep stopping to charge their electric vehicle because the vans are weighed down by so many heavy tools. This is all of these sorts of things are part of a bigger picture. People are really struggling at the moment. We have a changing global economic situation. It is not sensible to continue to be committed to these entirely ideological net zero targets, particularly when other countries around the world are still producing so much coal and using gas and don't have these commitments. That what we're doing here is just an act of self-harm that really is a drop in the ocean, will make absolutely no difference to the global climate.
No, exactly. And people ask me, and I don't know the answer to it, and I suspect you don't either. I mean, if you are about to buy, say, a family car, and you're buying because you find it to be the most, affordable, a petrol, car or a diesel car to put your family in, and you're probably going to keep it for 10 years, what happens to it in 2035 or in 2030? Does it become worthless? Can you sell it on? Nobody really knows the answer to any of these questions.
Yeah, and what do you do with those lithium batteries by the time the car is at the end of its life, and how much energy does it take to create those lithium batteries? Anyway, you're still using electricity, which needs to be created somehow.
Right, exactly right. Absolute madness. Let's talk about what a bad weekend it was, though, for Keir Starmer, because one of his MPs was arrested on child sex charges, and he hasn't been charged yet, so we have to assume he's innocent until proven guilty. However, he was a man that was very much, sort of sought after by Starmer. He's been involved in Labour politics since the days of Gordon Brown. He was in his government. He's a former teacher. He's accused of being involved in child sex allegations. I mean, it's a horrendous story. And then on the other side of the coin, he's got two female MPs, first-time MPs, refused entry to Israel because of their views on Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, on that first story, it's not just been a bad week for Keir Starmer, it's also been a bad week for our friend Carol Vorderman.
Yes.
Mike, because she was pictured in his leaflets during his campaign.
So she was.
And people have been pointing that out quite frequently online over the weekend,
yes.
I've noticed.
She's been accused of deleting quite a few tweets about her support for him, I think, hasn't she?
Yeah, I think maybe if you wanted to delete the tweets, you might want to, say something rather than just hide that you were involved. But anyway, one of the aspects of this story that I noticed is that it seems that these allegations are from the 2020s. So this is something quite recent. I don't know whether or not the Labour Party were aware of this. You would presume that they were aware of this when he was contesting Jacob Rees-Mogg's seat. But it does sort of raise...
Well, they declared themselves to be shocked and surprised, didn't they?
It's a slight... I mean, if they were aware, it's an interesting choice to get him to run in such a high-profile seat to try and get rid of Jacob Rees-Mogg, because obviously, that's... if something were to come out about it, as it has now, about those allegations, then it's a much bigger news story. So it's sort of questionable judgment on Labour's part, but of course we need to presume innocence until we know otherwise.
And of course, hypocrisy is the order of the day, though, isn't it? Because David Lammy, incredibly, actually got himself all worked up when Kemi Badenoch said that she actually agreed with Israel that these two people should not, in fact, have been allowed to enter Israel because of the way that they've conducted themselves, and because clearly Israel thought that they were coming there for a propaganda exercise, because they've previously only shown support for Palestine, shown no support for the Israeli state, instead believing Hamas figures of casualties and never really condemning Hamas either.
Yeah, Mike, there are so many layers of hypocrisy on this one, because on the one hand, there are some other stories where maybe we'll talk about today about Labour and free speech in relation to these trade talks with the US, because the US have been very critical on Labour's track record on free speech. Seems like the Labour Party trying to make this these MPs being refused entry to Israel into a free speech issue. So obviously they believe in free speech when it serves them, but really this is not about free speech as such. No member of parliament or politician from any country just simply has a right to enter another country. The issue here seems to be that the Labour Party don't seem to be able to conceive of the fact that countries have borders and should have borders, and that it's up to that country who they allow in or who they don't. And if the Labour Party don't want to allow these two MPs who have been so highly critical of Israel, that Israel regard it as anti-Israel hate, then that is up to them. That's what Trevor Phillips has said. Seems to be the view also of Kemi Badenoch. Israel have borders. They have a right, particularly at a time like this where they're effectively, still on a war footing, to decide who comes in and out of their country. So I think from the perspective of the Labour Party, they've got themselves really sort of twisted inside out over there.
Well, there's several people who pointed out this morning that they were very quiet when China issued a whole bunch of banning orders on British MPs, almost exclusively all Tory MPs, including Ian Duncan Smith, who were banned from going to China. I don't remember anybody, including David Lammy, standing up for the British right to go to any other country if you're a parliamentarian.
Yeah, there's an amazing lack of consistency, and I'm sure that the Labour Party would, again, change their tune if there was a particular right-wing politician who wanted to come here and visit the UK. I mean, even if you think about Sadiq Khan's attitude to the possibility of Donald Trump coming here, and the giant baby blimp. I mean, there's no consistency whatsoever, and it's entirely driven by Labour's, I would say, ideology, but I mean, it's politics.
Yeah, of course. Well, it might not surprise you to know, Emma, we've got a little clip, an historical clip. This is Chris Bryant MP talking about exactly that.
I'm here in Cambridge.
In the past, the Home Secretary repeatedly and quite rightly, when she was Home Secretary, the Prime Minister, when she was Home Secretary, said homophobes and racists who will stir up hatred in this country will not be allowed in this country, and if they come to this country, they'll be arrested. That's what should happen in this case, and the Home Secretary knows it. Just say it.
And he's talking about the President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's. I mean, if I were David Lammy, I could see how he might have a vested interest in this, because if every country were to do this, then the United States wouldn't have allowed David Lammy a seat around the table. I mean, it's all right for them if they want to criticize Israel and say that Israel should allow these MPs in, but what they can't say is that Israel don't have a right to prevent them from entering.
Also,
that it's some kind of injustice, and that these MPs are entitled to be able to go to Israel and to be able to see what's happening on the ground. They are not entitled. The only people here that have any right is the country of Israel to control its own borders and decide who allows it.
And I mean, all you have to do is cast your mind back a few years to the last Labour government, where Geert Wilders was an elected member of the Dutch Parliament, and he was actually banned from entering this country, even though he was an elected parliamentarian. So once again, I mean, even Dan Hodges, who's becoming more and more sensible in his old age, has said he doesn't understand what the Labour Party point of principle is here, because they've literally banned elected members of European parliaments.
Yeah, I mean, again, trying to make this into a free speech issue as the Labour Party seems absurd. And it's only because of pressure from the United States that they've now backed down on their plans to tighten up the Online Safety Act so that they would be able to get rid of, as they say, or use a duty to force online platforms to get rid of what in the previous incarnation of the bill was called legal but harmful content, which is content that it could be regarded as psychologically harmful to adults. And that was removed from the original bill because of free speech concerns in the previous Conservative government. They wanted to bring that back in, and it is literally only because of the pressure from the United States that they now have backed down over that. So this government have absolutely no sound instincts whatsoever to protect freedom of speech. So it's impossible for them to paint their criticism of Israel over this as anything other than a completely cynical move.
Indeed. And Jeremy Corbyn, of course, has also called it unacceptable, but Elon Levy, the former spokesman for the Israeli government, has said the last time Jeremy Corbyn entered Israel, he visited with an Islamist lobby group to meet senior Hamas officials. He says, I know that because I found out about the story. He failed to declare the funding for the trip in violation of parliamentary rules, and then the group tried to cover it up. You know.
And let's remember that he also invited one of these from Hamas to Parliament.
His friends in Hamas.
Famously. His friends from Hamas, exactly. So I imagine that Jeremy Corbyn won't be taking any holidays to Israel anytime soon.
No, I think not. Emma, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Emma Trimble there, talking a great deal of sense on the home of common sense, which is exactly what we are. Coming up, Harry Cole's here, political editor at The Sun. He's got a fascinating column in the paper today. He had found himself over in California, only to discover that everyone there thinks that Britain's gone mad. Britain is bonkers, is the verdict, and he'll tell you exactly why that is. Coming up next.
ended up in court, and a federal judge has said the United States has got to return him after he was mistakenly deported, deport him by Monday. So it's kind of interesting to see how that will play out, because of course Trump has gone really hard on these, you know, I'm going to be really tough on immigration. That was a really big part of his electioneering was this immigration. I mean, tough on it, and he made like quite a big show, and it was televised. These people being deported, all in chains and put in jail.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 23 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through. I'm sick of hearing all these Tory MPs, says Steve, attacking Labour on the net zero and EV enforcement. They seem to forget all this started and was signed off by them. Absolutely it was, but they at least seem to be moving around about pushing the deadlines back, didn't they? That was what they said they would do, and that was where they never quite got to. Peter from Doha says, who said politics is boring? Is it me, or is it getting more interesting every hour? You'll never have a quiet news day anytime soon. Well, Peter, one of the reasons it's interesting is because of the way certain people cover politics. You know, we're not the boring types who just tell you what the one politician said to the other politician. It's interesting people like me and Harry Cole, who joins me now. He's got a column in The Sun this morning, front and centre at page 10, in which it says, the world thinks Britain is bonkers. And who can blame them? Harry, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are we doing?
Yeah, not bad at all. So you found yourself in California, and much to your surprise, everyone you spoke to was an expert on the state of our nation. I mean, it's not that surprising, is it? Because when you think about what they're saying, they're actually right, aren't they?
Well, I mean, they seem to have a point. It was weird. It wasn't. I only wrote this column just because of purely. It was the second I landed, from cab drivers to waiters to bellboys, waitresses, strangers. You know, they're very, very chatty in California. Yeah. Random people I struck up conversation with in the couple of days I was there. Everyone asked me the same question of what the hell is going on in Britain, and they all had a very interesting level of detail, from immigration to net zero to grooming gangs to the boats to our demographic changes, through to things like the Tavistock Centre, the sort of gender reassignment clinic that now being sort of mothballed by the NHS for their sort of stance on gender realignment for under 18s and things like that. And it was actually, in fact, really eye-opening that we sort of sit here in Britain, and often we sort of take a bit of a sort of exceptionalist tone, and we sort of think we're slightly above the fray. Yeah. We're slightly, we look at Donald Trump and go, oh, look at what have the crazy Americans done now? And they're looking at us and thinking, well, what's crazy Britain up to? Right. And actually, we need these people to come and visit. We need our foreign investment to come to and invest in our country. We need tourism. And loads of people said to me that they actually wouldn't come to London now. They'd love to have come to London once upon a time, but they don't get stabbed or mugged. And
and the figures,
but our reputation is in the pan.
Yeah, no, and figures do bear them out. I mean, it's going all the way back to the 70s, which you won't be old enough to remember, but I do remember. And I remember leaving this country in 1983 to go and seek my fortune in America, because even though Thatcher had got in, it was still suffering from the kind of the hangover of the 3-day week, and the power crisis, and the lights out, and the fact that we used to have no power in the house. We had 1 hour in the morning to have breakfast, and 1 hour in the evening. This went on for months on end, when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And suddenly I went to America in 1983. Ronald Reagan was in charge, and it was a fantastic place to live. Everything was possible. It now feels similarly like that again, that America has kind of forged further forward, and we've sort of fallen backwards.
Well, I mean, America did go a little bit further on a lot of the sort of woke issues, a lot of the DEI stuff, but they are rowing back on it now. Donald Trump, even before he came into power, you had American firms, big American firms, suddenly sort of getting rid of their sort of DEI policies, their sort of woke agendas, and saying, actually, look, the world has changed. And obviously they were chasing a cheap buck in sort of all those ridiculously sort of right-on adverts we've seen over the years, and hiring policies and company policies, trying to get involved in politics. And actually, once that started to hit them in the wallet, and actually there was a sort of backlash amongst the American public about that, they very quickly did it. And now obviously Donald Trump's government has come in and has done sort of vast movements on abolishing that within the US state, whereas within the UK it feels like we're slightly lagging behind on the sort of realignment that's happening around the world, the sort of waking up to that issue. And actually, within our police forces, I think we talked about last week, within our public sector, there's still this sort of lefty politics that dominant that it's just completely out of kilter with the public. And it's interesting because, as I sort of said, we sort of take a bit of a, obviously Donald Trump's making it quite easy for us this week to think, what on earth are they up to? But it really is important to sometimes pause and think, actually, how's our reputation around the world looking? Are we looking a bit out of kilter with
common sense? And sometimes it just comes down to that. Look, if something sounds bonkers, it probably is bonkers.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I mean, when I you look around Europe, right, and you see what's happened as a result of the mass immigration that was encouraged, first of all, by Angela Merkel for people coming in from Syria, and almost every European country has been touched by it in some way, shape, or form, generally a negative way, because there's been so many people coming, and they're still coming.
Absolutely, and I think the boats, the sort of symbolism as a sort of metaphor for government incompetence and government impotence is quite striking. Look, the US border, the US southern border, tens of thousands of people pouring over that every year. It makes in numbers terms makes Dover look like a picnic. But I think it's just the inability to stop as an island. Traditionally, as an island, being an island off the coast of Europe has made it easier for us to defend ourselves over the years, and we're just unable to really do anything about that. And I think that's a sort of almost perfect metaphor. It's very easy for the world to understand, and the imagery of it is very easy to sort of go around the world. Yeah. And it's really interesting quite how the level of detail that people have about Britain, and we're almost held up as a bit of a warning to the Americans. Obviously, the relationship between America and Britain is intertwined over the last couple of hundred years, and we're almost seen as a sort of warning from the old country of what happens if, as you mentioned Ronald Reagan, that if you don't defend freedom, if you let the sort of, the thin end of the wedge, if you don't actually actively promote policies with every generation that protect the individual, protect freedom, then the slippery slope to socialism is never far away, and we're only one generation away from tyranny.
Exactly right. And I mean, they raised it in the White House visit by Keir Starmer to Donald Trump last month or whenever it was. J.D. Vance saying, what about free speech? And Starmer was very much at pains to point out we still have free speech in Britain. But this weekend we find out that Lucy Connolly, who's been locked up for 31 months for that Facebook post that she deleted, has now no longer been, she's been refused permission to go and visit her family, which is something that prisoners get to do on a regular basis, who are in prison for much more serious crimes than she is. She wasn't allowed to get out to visit her children, wasn't allowed to get out to visit her sick husband, and even Liz Truss, former Prime Minister, is now saying this case is an outrage.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt she tweeted an incredibly dumb, hateful thing, but does that deserve a 31-month prison sentence? That's the debate.
I think the answer is no, isn't it? I mean, I wasn't sure, but I think it's no.
In the land of the free, the land of the First Amendment, people always fall off their bar stools when you tell them that actually that you can go to prison for the stupid thing that you put up for 4 hours on Facebook or wherever it was, and then delete it in haste. And it's just it's cases like that, and cases like the slightly forgive me, but I mean perhaps slightly dotty old dear who stood outside the abortion clinic with the son. Yes, look, it's probably unsavoury, but does it deserve a conviction? Should it be criminal? And actually, that's, I think, what J.D. Vance is a divisive figure in terms of how he says things. He comes over and he takes a stand, and he perhaps maybe needs to work a little bit on his PR. But is he wrong? Is he wrong to say that?
And as far as his base in America is concerned, he's absolutely right, because all she's doing is basically protecting what she would see as her own right to protest and the rights of the unborn child, which are pretty hot in a lot of states in America.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a much more virulent debate in the US than there's ever been over here. But but to sort of create this sort of poster girl for the decline of free speech across Europe. In frankly the country that basically invented British liberty and then exported it to the United States, who then enshrined it in their constitution when they decided to go a different way. And these are not values that are unique to America. We're meant to have invented this stuff, and there's a sorrow in what a lot of people say. There's a sort of fascination, but there's also it's not an angry what the hell is going on, Britain. It's a guys, what are you doing?
Yeah.
No, exactly right. And one quick one at the end. You've also written about the 2 Labour MPs who were refused entry to Israel. And I like your last paragraph, which says, isn't it remarkable we've heard more noise from Labour about these 2 MPs than about their other MP who was arrested the same weekend on child abuse allegations?
Well, exactly. Absolutely stum. And obviously, look, it's a live investigation. But, you know, perhaps some sort of acknowledgement from a lot of Labour MPs are making a lot of noise, a lot of government ministers across the airwaves in the last 48 hours. You don't really want to, you know, say anything about that, but are making a big hoo-ha about these MPs who, frankly, I'm not going to swear because it's too early in the morning, Mike, and I know you don't like swearing on the show, but if your listeners don't know what FAFO means, perhaps have a little internet-based research on that. But that's exactly what these MPs have done. You can't go charging around citing the Hamas Health Ministry figures as if they're gospel, and then, you know, accusing Israel of war crimes and saying arrest Benjamin Netanyahu and sanction Israeli ministers in the style that we sanction the Russians. You can't say that and then be like, you know what, I just could pop over to Tel Aviv for a bit of sunshine and say hi to these guys, and not expect on the border to be like, what the hell? Right. Israel is a country at war. It's a country that's eternally under attack. Most days from countries and neighbours that have vowed to wipe it off the map. And then it has to deal with supposed allies like Britain sending parliamentarians who frankly hate them to think they can go there on a jolly. What planet are these people on?
Well, it also says in black and white on immigration into Israel, these are the things that are possibly going to cause you to be questioned and or refused entry. If you are considered to have publicly criticised the state of Israel, publicly called for a boycott of Israel, or belong to an organisation which has called for a boycott, you know, there you go. They should have known. I'm going to leave you with one thing, which you may not have seen yet. Carrie Johnson posted this last night on her Instagram account, and it's her husband Boris and one of their kids at a safari park.
I honestly don't know what I'm about to see.
Have a look.
You're thinking very Oh, Christ!
I think it's one of his ex-wives who's been reincarnated as an emu.
I thought it might be one of those rats. I thought it might be one of those rats the size of cats, which also I actually put in that column today. If you have a little look at the little bubble on page
I've seen
10,
it, yeah.
There's rats the size of cats, which is basically I only put that in there because I knew you'd be reading that, Mike.
Brilliant. Great stuff. Harry, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Harry Cole, great column today in The Sun on page 10, all about how in California they think we've gone mad here in this country. I'm not surprised they think that with some of the things that are going on. This is Talk. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Dr. Paul Stott, because guess what? They want to bring yet another jihadi bride back to this country from a refugee camp in Syria, and we'll be finding out why the BBC has been yet again accused of Islamist propaganda. You couldn't make it up. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:37. I'm Mike Graham. Before we do anything else, let's get a voice note from Phil.
Good morning, Mike. Phil from Nottingham. Is there any chance the Labour government, instead of obsessing about Israel controlling its borders, could perhaps control ours?
I mean, it's a controversial thought, isn't it? I mean, the idea that they're saying, we're so surprised that anybody can be banned from entering a country. Well, no wonder they're surprised, because they can't stop anybody from entering this country. To wit, there's a story in The Sun today, terror threat exclusive. Judges boost UK return of jihadi bride. This is a woman who travelled to Syria to join ISIS terrorists some years ago. Basically, she could be returning to the UK after immigration judges backed her case. The woman, who apparently lives somewhere near Shamima Begum in a Syrian refugee camp, cannot be named, right, to protect her identity. That's all right then. She went out there with her husband in 2014. She was stripped of her citizenship in 2017, suffered a brain injury in an airstrike in 2019, and is cared for by her son, who, despite being born in Syria, is a British citizen. Unbelievably. So she, in fact, may be on her way back to this country thanks to the softly immigration judges. Dr. Paul Stott is here, Head of Security and Extremism at Policy Exchange. Dr. Paul, very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Mike.
We'll get on to the BBC in a minute. I just wanted to ask you about this jihadi bride story, because it's quite a big deal. I mean, we still haven't really found out for sure if Shamima Begum is ever going to be allowed to come back here. But there's obviously quite a few of these women still out there. And why are immigration judges giving them the right to come back?
Well, this looks like a sort of late April fool, Mike, doesn't it, that people will read in the newspapers this morning. I mean, we don't know this woman's name, so we've not got the full background, but from what's in the media, she left the UK with her husband. Yes. In 2014 to join Islamic State. She chose to live in the 7th century, and I'm afraid that's where we should leave her. The argument seems to be that you know, she's suffered an injury in an airstrike. She's got a son who is somehow a British citizen despite being born.
Yeah, how does that work?
Yeah, I've no idea that this young man has never lived in this country. He was born in Syria, and indeed the mother was stripped of her British citizenship. That was entirely the correct thing to do with those who go off and join Islamic State, and that's where the matter should end. So really now the ball is in Yvette Cooper's court. She's going to have to get this right, because once we set the precedent that these women can come back, even in cases such as this, where they've been stripped of their citizenship, it will never end.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because there's an awful lot of them still over there, because we talked to a guy called Alan Duncan, who's in and out of there quite frequently and has interviewed Shamima Begum in the past, and he tells me that these refugee camps are vast and full of people who went there from Britain.
Yes, there's certainly, I mean, you see figures sometimes in the dozens, and then obviously people will have had children whilst they've been over there. But no, we're under no moral duty or political duty to take these guys back. If we're under a legal duty, the government needs to change the law.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the BBC, because they're in trouble once again. They had a BBC News article about Eid, which was written, I guess, last week, the Muslim holiday that marks the end of Ramadan. Even Tom Tugendhat has had a go at them, and he's not exactly, you know, the world's most right-wing Tory MP. But they basically used the controversial term reverts for people who have converted to Islam, because apparently in the Islamic faith the belief is that everybody was born a Muslim, so that if you suddenly decide to convert to being a Muslim, you're actually reverting as opposed to converting.
Yes, so this was in a BBC article we spotted at Policy Exchange Friday afternoon, and I think the term revert was used 9 times in the article, and the BBC journalist had used it in her own tweet about the article. 2 of those 9 examples were quotes. You know, if people are using that term themselves, it's entirely legitimate to quote it. But it is a loaded term. It's a contentious term. And as you say, it's one that seems to suggest that everybody is born Muslim. I think the argument is that there's a particular, you know, we're all born with a relationship with God, and if we aren't brought up Muslim but return to the faith, or turn to the faith, convert to it, then we are reverting to Islam. And the BBC really got themselves into a mess. They got a lot of criticism, and then they seemed to spend quite a bit of time on Saturday editing and re-editing this article.
Oh, yeah.
So it's now changed considerably. I think, though, there's still questions here, and we need to hear from the BBC a bit more detailed, who commissioned this article, why it was commissioned, what oversight there actually was, what editing it went through, and really an explanation as to how the BBC has got such a lack of touch on these issues. Because, revert, it's a term with, I think, for those who are atheists or secularists or who follow other faiths, it's got a sort of supremacist tinge to it.
But it's also not true, is it? Because, if, for example, I decided to convert to Islam, I wouldn't be reverting to it because I was never a member of the Islamic faith. So if somebody tells me that I suddenly was without knowing it, that doesn't make it true.
No, it's extremely curious, Mike. And what the BBC now need to do is really come out and explain themselves, talk a little bit more about this process. But I'm afraid these issues will keep happening because I just don't think it has the touch for recognising what the majority of the public actually feel, understand, etc., etc. This is the national broadcaster.
Yeah.
And when it keeps getting itself into these issues, there's clearly a problem.
Yeah, maybe the BBC should revert to an unbiased media organisation like it was set up to be by Lord Reith.
Well, I'm not sure what Lord Reith himself would make of this sort of thing, but I think the main issue going forward for the BBC is, how does it respect its licence payers?
Yeah.
How does it get this right, and how does it avoid these mistakes in the future?
And isn't it funny that the mistakes all seem to be made in the same direction, though?
Well, that's the point I was alluding to, Mike, when I really talked about it. Its lack of touch, its lack of recognition of what's, I think, the majority of the public. And the BBC spends a lot of money on it, on its diversity programming, on broadening its recruitment base, and there's some justification for that. But it's not particularly good at recognising opinions of some of the groups who've been unhappy, who've been critical of this article, and who, as I said, make up the majority of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a no-brainer for me. I don't know why it's not for them. Dr. Paul Stock, great to talk to you, Head of Security and Extremism and Policy Exchange. Lots of you getting in touch about the car tax business and whether or not you believe Keir Starmer to be a friend, indeed, of the motorist. Morning, Mike, says Stephen Milton Keynes. Let's not forget, it's not only road tax increasing across the board. This lot have also slapped on a new tax called luxury car tax, which applies to all new cars over £40,000. This can add up to over £4,000 in additional tax, depending on the value and the CO2 emissions. Starmer is clearly no fan of the automotive industry. And one from Anna in Surrey says, I would suggest that we refuse this vile pair of so-called Labour MPs' re-entry to the UK. Well done, Israel, she says. And one from Lee in Birmingham says, good morning, Mike. I woke yesterday at 6:35 to discover my house refuse bin was being emptied. Second time since Christmas. Well, hey, well done. Brilliant. Maybe we should get a Starmer hey for that. Absolutely incredible. And Terry in Slough, anyone with an ounce of common sense knows that this idiotic rush to net zero will be disastrous for this country, but there seems to be a lack of common sense in this Labour government. Yeah, they don't seem to know what common sense is, do they? I mean, they talk about it. They mention the phrase. They say common sense because everybody does now, but they're really not imbued with it, are they? 0344 499 1000 is the number. We're going to talk to Donald Cameron MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod coming next. He is, of course, also in receipt of some honours from the King. He's going to be talking to us about a strange story from Edinburgh University where lecturers have apparently become the first in the UK to undertake accent bias. Yep, you heard it right. Apparently Scottish accents are now discriminated against in Scotland. Also, we'll ask him about how he's getting on with the national insurance hike, because he runs a big business and it's going to cost him an awful lot more money now to operate it. Absolutely utterly ridiculous. I think he might have something to say as well about whether or not Keir Starmer is a friend of the car driver. This is Talk.
in one of their documents that where they actually say that the trustees accept that ESG risks will impact on the returns of the fund. Well, hang on. I mean, that literally means they're accepting that political ideology is more important than their fiduciary duties to the beneficiaries of the pension fund. And I just think it's another example where the obsession with net zero and environmental, social governance issues is costing the taxpayer huge sums of money.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 9, and of course that'll be the final hour of the show. It's gone really quickly today. It's a beautiful day outside. We're going to be 24 degrees coming up this week. There's some kind of heat dome coming up from southern Spain, I think. But we're going to be hotter than most of Europe. That's what they're telling me anyway. It's been a beautiful weekend. So let's talk to Donald McLeod, columnist, of course, entrepreneur and impresario up there in Bonnie, Scotland, where it's probably not quite as hot as it is down here. But I can see the sun streaming in, Donald. Very good morning to you.
Yes, indeed, the sun is streaming in and it's melting the ice on my car as we speak.
Yeah, well, the car, I was just talking to my producer Christian about, I can't imagine what your road tax bill is going to be this year, because the road tax is going through the roof. I'm presuming you're not buying the idea of Keir Starmer, the friend of the motorist, that he's trying to put out this morning.
I don't buy the idea of Keir Starmer doing anything at the moment, right? I mean, it's a disgrace. I mean, he's no friend of the hospitality industry, has been well documented, and we'll no doubt cover that again. And he's no friend of the motorists, but worst of all, he's supported the eco-zealots up here called the Scottish Government, who are destroying the economy in the pursuit of that hallowed land of net zero and greenery. So the sun, I think, is about the only thing we get for free up here.
Yeah, they'll probably figure out where
that's very rare.
They'll figure out where it's actually. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's net zero about the net zero policies is net zero growth. You get none.
Yeah, well, I've always said that, you know, when they brought in the LEZ, I called it the low economy zone, and you know, it's a disaster, as it is right across the UK, as you see in London. What Sadiq Khan has done to London, he's destroyed it.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know, it's shocking, absolutely shocking. And this is the week, I presume, that you start having to pay the increased national insurance to all the people that you employ, which is not something I suppose is going to cheer you up, is it?
No, definitely not. And actually, it's perilous with some of the figures we're looking at. And many businesses are going under. You know, I'm worried about my own. I really am.
Yeah.
I mean, going forward, it's, you know, that plus the minimum wage increases. It's a 200 grand hit, as I said before. And where does that money come from? I mean, it's lovely seeing the sun out, but that actually stops people going to nightclubs. You know, it's no friend of the hospitality industry either. Well, that aspect of it, and I don't know what they're doing. I mean, in London, you're looking at Sadiq Khan getting round the table with UK Hospitality and the Nighttime Industries Association, and they're going to reinvigorate the whole nighttime economy down there. But I don't know how. I mean, the Labour Party have done a fantastic job in Khan in particular of totally destroying it. Yeah. So now they're a friend of hospitality. I just don't buy that.
I know.
No.
Well, my kids are in town at the moment because we've been celebrating commemorating my mother's death from a year or so ago, and they went out one night. They're staying in London. The one from California, the other one who's coming from Manchester. They went out to see if they could go out for a drink after midnight. Couldn't find anywhere open in London.
Yeah, well, they're going to increase the hours. Yeah. You know, the thing is, we can't afford to pay the staff as it is. You know, it's become a real burden, and so hours are getting cut, shifts are getting cut, jobs will go. And let's increase hours as if this is some sort of panacea, there's some sort of, you know, magic cure. No, danger. I mean, they really need to start supporting the hospitality. We had cash, reduce the NI load, reduce the rates, reduce VAT down to something reasonable, round about the 10%, something like that, you know, which they've not done, and they refuse to do. They haven't.
And they've been asked to do something like that for ages, and they just haven't moved on it, have they? Because I've seen Sacha Lord talking about that in Manchester as well. Let's talk about this weird story at Edinburgh University, though, because apparently it's become the first university in the United Kingdom to undertake accent bias training to stop anti-Scottish bullying. Apparently there's not enough Scottish people going to Edinburgh University.
Well, who's moan now? They're all getting a bit of a stushy about this, aren't they?
They certainly are.
Behaviour, as they would say. But, I mean, there is some truth in it. I mean, well, you know, we slam a lot of the sort of diversity and inclusion, it's sort of rhetoric, you know, policies that are going there. But it seems to be that, you know, Scots only make 25% of their school body.
Right.
And they've been discriminated against by, and what they're complaining about, allegedly, discriminated by English students, snobs who come from privileged backgrounds and who mock Scots for their accent. How dare they? And for being working class, and you know, it's got so much, you know, of a problem that they've actually instructed the lecturers in Edinburgh Uni, you know, to draw the attention to the students there. Now, language discrimination has always been about, as we know, you know, from the early days of the BBC. Hello, how are you? Yes, you know, everybody talked to the clip tones of the southeast, but people from like Liverpool, the northeast of England, Newcastle, they could, you know, they could never get on the airways to save themselves. But you know, within uni, it's quite worrying actually if that exists, and you know, nobody likes discrimination. At all.
Is it not more likely? Is this not more likely though to be the sort of the university lecturers themselves who've decided that, you know, oh, there's something going on here? I mean, I spent plenty of time in Edinburgh, you know, as you well know. I mean, I was only ever given a hard time by one bloke in a bar once for being English, right? And there was meant to be this government sort of problem about, oh, you know, there's anti-British, there's anti-English feeling, there's anti-Scottish feeling. They made it into a hate crime if you called somebody in English so and so, rather than if you just punched them without calling them that. You know, it's all a bit mad, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it could be that, and probably is that, but there is sort of a wee bit of truth, a grain of truth in it. But you know, is it such a big problem if it exists at all? And as you've just said, no doubt anybody caught doing it will be banged up in a hate crime for, you know, slagging someone's accent. You know, that's, you know, there's a bigger problem in Scottish universities, and you know, it's been highlighted in recent weeks up here. Certainly, I don't know about down south, but there's Dundee Uni collapsing, £35 million cut, 600 job losses. You've got but at the same point, you've got the principal, Ian Gillespie, trousering £305,000 a year in salary, but these jobs are going. And then in Edinburgh Uni itself, you're talking 144 million pounds worth of cuts looking at, whereas the Edinburgh principal there, Sir Peter Matheson, there's something in that name, Matheson, is trousering a stonking £422,000 a year for, you know, for what? I don't know.
Right,
for
exactly.
coming up with some
maybe they ought to stop sort of, you know, recruiting quite so many students, you know, many of whom end up with a degree that's not really worth the paper it's written on, and who've got themselves about £50,000 in debt as a result.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, they're going to have to look at the whole model of education in Scotland. I suppose across the UK, but I mean, Scotland has, you know, been renowned down the centuries as a place, a well-renowned, trusted place of learning. You know, famous unis like St Andrews, Edinburgh, Glasgow, even Aberdeen. But this all seems to be getting eroded. There's not, you know, with charging, you know, Scots students students, they get free education.
Yeah. Well, don't you think there's? I bet you there's
free to them, but it's got to cost everybody else.
Yeah, right.
And whereas in England, you know, they charge English students and UK students £9,000 a year, but foreign students can pay up to £40,000 a year. So there's a sort of they're pushing to get the money in, but as the world now sort of starts to tumble, as China in particular is regarded as the enemy of the state, a lot of Chinese students are no longer coming up, and they were the bread and butter of the education system at the university level up here. So it's a bit of a mess, but I mean, they claim they're all crying, oh, we need more money, we need more money.
Yeah.
But there's your principal taking £422,000 a year. I'm sure Nicola Sturgeon couldn't have made that much money, you know.
No, exactly.
I mean, you never know, right? Enough, you never know.
You never know. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's too much money involved, and they should get rid of all of the greed in the business and actually just sort people out with academic qualifications who are good enough to get there. Good to talk to you, Donald. I've got to run. Thank you very much indeed. Donald McLeod, columnist, entrepreneur, impresario. He's paying a lot more money to the government now than he was this time last month. Coming up in the next hour, Isabel Oakeshot's going to join us, and we'll get her view on all manner of things, including the Jihadi Bride, and the Free Speech Union are here as well. This, of course, is Morning Glory. We'll be back after the news.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us carry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of £70.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10p, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks
How
ago.
much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Keeping it real.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer here then, of course, to take you through until 1 o'clock. Isabel Oakeshott coming up in this hour, as is the Free Speech Union in the guise of Jill Levine, their legal counsel, because, of course, we'll be talking to her about Lucy Connolly, the woman who was jailed for a tweet about Southport, and she deleted the tweet practically immediately, about a couple of hours after she put it up. Not only was she sentenced to 31 months in prison, but she was not allowed home to see her children who were young and to see her husband who was sick, on the basis that somebody said she couldn't get, sort of compassionate leave, which most prisoners get if they've been behaving properly inside the prison, where they're spending usually a lot less time for a lot worse crimes. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. We spoke to Harry Cole in the last hour, who said that in America, where he's just been, people think Britain has gone completely bonkers. Incredible stuff. 0344 499 1000. One of the stories we're covering this morning is that yet another jihadi bride, not Shamima Begum, but somebody who stays and lives very close to her in a Syrian refugee camp, may be being allowed to return to this country, despite the fact that she and her husband went out to join ISIS in 2014. Here's Judith on that.
Hi Mike, Judith here from Radlett. Gosh, another day, another crazy story. Regarding the jihadi bride, who the left-wing judges seem to think should be allowed back in our country. Do you know what I would say? Yes, let them back in on the proviso that they live near you, in your street, in your leafy suburb, or wherever it is, and go to school with your kids and your grandchildren. That's what I would say to all of these people that want to bring this type of horror back on our streets. Don't we have enough problems here? It absolutely beggars belief.
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? Not helped, of course, by Labour, the government party, who are in charge at the moment. 2 members of their organisation went over to Israel and weren't allowed in. Why? Because the Israeli government thought that these 2 Labour MPs elected to this parliament, the mother of all parliaments, would not actually be playing honest brokers. They would be going into Israel for the purpose of creating a propaganda scenario whereby they, as ever, have never actually been on the side of Israel in any of their protestations and any of the things that they've said. They have constantly been railing against Israel and in support of Palestine, and have never once, as far as I'm aware, ever condemned Hamas. And so, David Lammy, who called for Benjamin Netanyahu to be arrested, has got himself all wrapped up in, and he's got all of his knickers in a twist, because he says that any parliamentarian should be allowed to come to any country in the world and be allowed in. Well, that's not what happened to Geert Wilders, who wanted to come here from the Netherlands and was stopped by a Labour government, and also Chris Bryant, who actually once asked for Donald Trump to be arrested if he came to Britain as well, or blocked from coming. It's 5 minutes past 9. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Lots of you have been getting in touch this morning, so I'm delighted to say that I'm going to get to as many of them as I can. This one from Claire in Worcestershire. She says, my fiancé and I have been planning our wedding for the last 18 months. We get married in 3 weeks. We asked the registrar in Scotland to ensure we had a Scottish native with strong Scottish accent to marry us, as we wanted a very Scottish authentic wedding. The lady was great and said she'd request it verbally and do her best, but she wasn't allowed to write it down, as it could be seen as discriminatory. It's got nothing to do with our lack of openness for multicultural. We just wanted to have a Scottish accent in a Scottish manner marrying us. As it stands, we're still waiting on being introduced to our registrar and whether he or she will be Scottish sounding. He is hoping. Well, I can do quite a good Scottish accent if you need somebody to step in at the last minute. No problem at all. I'm sure Isabel Oakeshott can do the same. She spent a bit of time up there. Isabel, very good morning to you.
I totally can. What kind of accent do you want?
Well, I mean apparently it's now discrimination up in Scotland to discriminate against people with Scottish accents, which tells you everything that's gone mad.
As you know, there's not just one Scottish accent. There's a lot of them. So you want a Glaswegian or on Edinburgh. There's many different ones.
Aye. Should we just carry on this interview with Scottish accents then? Is that what you're saying?
We really could do, couldn't we?
Unbelievable stuff.
I worked on Scottish newspapers, when I worked on the Daily Record, and I used to do the night shift there, the anti-English racism that I used to suffer, you know, because you get people after a few drinks ringing in the newsroom late at night, tip-offs. And I mean, I clearly remember a number of occasions people saying, I'm not talking to you, hen, you're English, you know. You just had to suck it up as an English person there. But on more serious matters, I think that the Israelis are absolutely right.
Of course they are.
Those MPs. And I, as you know, was recently in Israel. And I was quite, I have to say, almost shocked, actually, by the level of inquisition that I faced just getting out of Israel. I mean, I was actually taken aside, very detailed questions. It was about 15, 20 minutes of inquisition. And although I was a little bit shocked by it, I think it's fairly routine there. I reflected that this is what sensible countries do. They are very careful about who comes in and out. And that's what the UK should do. I mean, most countries are not like us, just come one, come all. Doesn't matter what you've said about our country or what ill you wish us, you know, welcome in. That is not a way to maintain national security. And it's just ridiculous for David to say any elected parliamentarian should be able to come in. I mean, you know, is he going to be welcoming Marine Le Pen? I very much doubt it. You know, it's pick and choose as far as he's concerned.
Well, exactly. He's also the same foreign secretary who called for Benjamin Netanyahu to be arrested on war crimes charges if he was ever to set foot in Britain, which even Keir Starmer thought was a step too far. But I mean, I've been given the immigration checklist here, which is what you face when you go in. You probably saw this. Basically, it says some visitors may face longer searches and questioning, including those with Palestinian or Arab ancestry, with evidence of previous travel which may be considered suspicious, like, for example, into certain countries, and who are considered to have publicly criticised the state of Israel or have publicly called for a boycott of Israel or Israeli settlements, both of which have happened with these two particular individuals. I would ask the question, rather, why are these two people going to Israel, presumably on taxpayer-funded visits, which we're paying for, when one of them is a former BBC journalist who was born in China and who has got some links to the Chinese governments over the history of her time here, and similarly one who was born in Yemen, who seems to be very, very pro-Palestinian and actually actively anti-Israeli.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're going to be. I think it would be fair to say, at the very least, there is a significant risk that they are pursuing agendas that are not aligned with the agenda of the Israeli government. Let's put it that way. That's me being diplomatic and careful there.
Yes.
I don't know what the ostensible purpose of their trip was. Perhaps they're out to educate themselves about why Israel is pursuing Hamas in the way that it is and understand better the Israeli government's perspective, and that, I would welcome that. But I'm not sure they could be trusted. And
that is the problem, isn't it?
Felt the same.
But a bit like Harry Cole's piece in The Sun today, in which he says that, he's been to California in the past few days and discovered that everybody in America now thinks that Britain has gone sort of bonkers mad. And if you looked at the Labour government and the Labour Party from outside, whether it be another country or just another part of society, it looks like a party which is not very friendly towards Jewish people or Israel.
Well, when he says that the perspective is that everyone here has gone mad, I mean, he's not wrong, is he? I mean, I know there's a freedom of speech issue which is getting so much traction on the other side of speech in the pond. And, these cases, not only the whole endless pro-Palestinian marches and protests and so on, but the repression of free speech that Keir Starmer is in patent denial about, having sat in the Oval Office and said, we're very proud of our tradition of free speech, meanwhile locking up perfectly decent law, previously unblemished record of, abiding by the law, people like Lucy Connolly, for years on end, for a tweet that was ill-judged but rapidly deleted. It's a terrible look for our country.
It absolutely is. And the other thing that they know about is the mass migration problem. And as I've said earlier on the show today, it's not escaped my notice that this Labour government can't understand anybody being refused entry to a state in any part of the world, because we don't refuse anyone. I mean, we're now thinking about bringing a jihadi bride back from Syria who went there voluntarily with her husband in 2014 to join bloody ISIS.
Yeah, and as we on Talk revealed a few months ago, it was only probably as a result of pressure from our station that the government didn't allow in this, radical preacher who has been banned from the whole of the rest of Europe. Right. It really is absolutely ridiculous. And, I travel a lot, of course I do. I mean, the clue's in the title, international editor. And what I pick up from people around the places, around the world, is a real feeling of sadness at what's happened to Britain. Yeah. The phrase that I hear most often is, it's so sad, it's such a pity, what has happened to your country? And it's an embarrassment. And, what I think exercises so many of us is this rescuable, and how much more damage can be done before it becomes too late to rescue? And I think it is rescuable, but I do worry about how bad things are going to get.
It's definitely on the brink. I mean, when you see, I know you highlighted this at the weekend, Robert Jenrick's little thread on Twitter over the last few days about the state of Britain's prisons. He's done a sort of special thread on it, saying that Britain's prisons are being overrun by Islamist gangs. Self-styled Muslim Brotherhood leaders control wings in many high-security prisons. I mean, it's unacceptable. Surely something has to be done.
I mean, that I was shocked by that. It's not a subject I know a lot about. I haven't really spent time examining what's going on inside our prisons, but it really truly worried me to see that many of our prisoners, according to Robert Jenrick, are basically being, press ganged into signing up and converting to an extreme form of Islam in order to keep themselves safe in jail. I mean, how can we have this going on?
I know. And then similarly, the BBC, I mean, I'm going to just go run through the usual gamut of, where are we now type stories. The BBC getting rebuked because they use the phrase revert to people who are converting to Islam, because apparently in the Islamic faith, we are all born Muslims, and if you then decide to become a Muslim, you're not converting, you're reverting. And as I said to Paul Stott earlier on, I'd like to see the BBC revert to being a proper news organisation as opposed to what the hell it is now.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely just crazy, isn't it? It's completely ridiculous, and we would all love the BBC to revert to its core offer of providing unbiased news, which is of interest to the British taxpayer, instead of endlessly highlighting random overseas stuff or pursuing some kind of pro-Palestinian agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lindsay Hoyle, he was back in the news. I don't know why he keeps talking about these free trips that he takes, but he now says that he takes these freebies because he's speaking, in his words, truth to power. As somebody pointed out to me, I'd very much like to enjoy the brunch at the weekends at the Westin Hotel and Spa in the Cayman Islands as part of speaking truth to power, but I'm not sure he can quite get away with that one.
Yeah, and I saw that he's apparently said that if he was a speaker in any other country, he'd have a private jet.
Yes.
I mean, I like Lindsay Hoyle. I think he's a good speaker, and I think he's broadly a fair speaker. And I've witnessed a lot of them, and many of them have been truly terrible, as was his predecessor, John Bercow, who was just absolutely ghastly, as everyone will remember, doing his very, very best to upset the Brexit vote referendum. So I think Lindsay Hoyle does a really good job, but I think this has been pretty unfortunate, to say the least, this perception of globe-trotting in very, very lavish style. And I'm not really convinced it's part of the job of the speaker to be globe-trotting and speaking truth to power. His job is, in my view, is his primary role is to be, to arbitrate over the British Parliament. It's not about going all around the world on jollies. And as for the private jet thing, I've actually long felt that our Prime Minister should have a private jet. I feel that it demeans our country to have the Prime Minister, taking trains across Europe, that kind of thing.
I mean, he does use a private jet quite a bit, though, doesn't he, when he wants to?
It's not a branded, here comes the United Kingdom's, air carrier for the Prime Minister. And I think it would be, I know this is controversial and it's very un-British, but I think that it would elevate our country to have that. That said, if it's Starmer that's inside and is passenger number one, it might not have perhaps.
I think you have to drag David Lammy out of it first, kicking and screaming. I mean, he's the one that's spending all the money on the private jets. Drag.
Well, I mean, it doesn't give him any more credibility, does it? I mean, again, it's a sort of international laughing stock insofar as anybody's even thinking about him.
Yeah, exactly right. And one final one for you, who's seen this in page 13 of the Mail. It's not particularly international, but it's a follow-up on one of the big stories we did here about Motability cars and how ludicrous the system is and how much at risk of fraudulent usage it is. Vehicles, this is probably one of the more staggering introductions to a story I've seen. Vehicles given to benefit claimants under the controversial Motability scheme have been involved in hundreds of crimes, including drug and sex crimes.
Yeah, I did see it, and I was, I suppose I was shocked by it, except that the bottom line is that there are now so many Motability vehicles everywhere that there's statistically a pretty high chance that they're going to be involved in all sorts of bad things.
Yeah.
Look, I think the Motability scheme is totally discredited. It is so obviously massively abused.
Yeah.
I would scrap it. If
I was going to say, surely we just have to scrap it and start again, no?
I would scrap it and start again. There's a limited number of people. I think the figure is about 40,000, but I don't want to be too sure of that because I might be wrong, who are very obviously absolutely in need of this type of special help.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of people, in my own opinion, should not be getting these cars. And I think the system is rotten to the core. I think it is a gross abuse of taxpayers' money. And frankly, it is so discredited that it should be scrapped in its entirety, and something new could perhaps arise from the ashes.
Yeah, surely we could save a few quid by doing that as well. Isabel, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Isabel Oakeshott talks, international editor there, with a lot of common sense for you on this Monday morning, just after 19 minutes past 9. Pauline from Maui says this: Morning, Mike. As a Brit living in the US for many years, I can confirm Harry Cole is 100% correct. Americans think you're all completely deranged. And not everybody agrees, of course. Some say it really should be, at the end of the day, more about the government who are deranged, not so much the people. I mean, certainly it's true to say that most of the people in this country are not deranged, but we are being led very much down the garden path by this hopeless government. How about this from Vern in Southampton? Says, I think Humza Useless is available to marry the couple in Scotland. He will arrive at the registry office by scooter. Yes, of course, that very famous clip of him falling off it. Oh, have we got it? Oh, let's have another look. Here he is, the former First Minister of Scotland, no longer standing, I don't think, for MSP. Here he was showing off when he had an injury at one point. This was played pretty much every time we put him on Plank of the Week. There you go. Terrible. Absolutely awful. Dreadful. Here's one from Mick. Who do those Labour MPs think they are? Israel's right to ban them, and Lammy should be banned from the USA, Israel and the UK for good measure. Absolutely right. And somebody's asking me if I enjoyed my banana. Was I still on the off screen when I was eating it? Oh, you can see it on the wine show. Okay, yeah, I'm still eating it. Thanks very much for asking. It's 20 past 9. Let's talk.
I was a fool, man. I was a fool before I lived in the light of the Lord. I was a drug addict, a sex addict, and an imbecile. But what I never was a rapist. I've never engaged in non-consensual activity. I pray that you can see that by looking in my eyes.
That was Russell Brand's response to those charges. He went further, stating there was so little trust in the British government that levels of corruption are unprecedented. I'm talking specifically to you in the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, Mike. Joe from Northampton here. He says, my brother's been out of the UK for 30 years, but his young son, born in Korea a couple of years ago, is apparently a British citizen. Crazy.
Well, if your brother's still a British citizen, it's not actually crazy because his son will then be a British citizen. But if this woman who has gone to Syria has had her nationality revoked, so she is no longer British, then the son should not be a British citizen, because you can't be a British citizen if somebody who is your parent has had their citizenship revoked, surely. Anyway, we'll come back to that. Jill Levine is here, legal counsel for the Free Speech Union. She might know the answer to that, actually. Jill, very good morning to you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about Lucy Connolly, first of all, because not only has Liz Truss now come out and said that she should be freed, but it turns out over the weekend, and we read a piece from Alison Pearson in The Telegraph, great piece about what's actually going on inside the prison there, that she wasn't even allowed out on compassionate grounds for a weekend visit to her children and her sickly husband, which surely most prisoners would be allowed normally.
Yes, it does seem that poor Lucy's had quite harsh treatment in many different ways. I mean, she was initially refused bail when she was arrested, which in itself was a very questionable decision, given the usual criteria that's applied when you're arrested and whether you're given bail or not. She was remanded into custody, not given bail. Landed up pleading guilty, which I think for many people who are remanded into custody, that tends to happen. They're away from their family. They're in a very stressful situation. They don't have the support around them. And also they're encouraged to do so on the basis they'll get a much lighter sentence.
Right.
Poor Lucy found herself then convicted and then sentenced. And unfortunately, the sentencing in this particular case seems to have gone wrong somewhere. Usually when judges pass sentence, they have to sort of balance up both the aggravating and mitigating factors. And in Lucy's case, there were quite a lot of mitigating factors that really outweighed the aggravating ones. And in this case, it doesn't appear that balancing out was done correctly.
Right. Well, that's exactly the thing that we talk about all the time here on this station and on my show as well as many other shows, that, you know, quite often you'll get cases of quite hardened criminals, people who have committed some pretty awful crimes, who have sort of mitigating circumstances and who end up getting a suspended sentence, for example, or people who have committed violent crime not going to prison for as long as she has been sent to prison for. And it seems as though almost all of the kind of you know, what you might call caveats in the justice system have been completely and utterly ignored, and she has been punished over and above, way over and above the severity of the crime.
Absolutely. I mean, she sent an intemperate post. She posted it on the day of the massacre itself. She deleted it about 3.5 hours later. There's no evidence that it caused anyone to do anything violent. She has no previous convictions. She has a 12-year-old daughter, a husband who has a serious illness. It doesn't appear as if those factors were properly weighed when that sentence was passed. And I believe there was another man who was actually convicted of violent disorder who had actually thrown a piece of metal at police, and he got a lighter sentence than Lucy did. So we're very hopeful that in this appeal, Lucy will have her sentence commuted. We'll have to wait and see.
Right. And I mean, I think her husband's a counsellor as well, I think, or was. And you think that had some kind of bearing as well, that she was kind of punished more heavily because of that?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think at the time there was feelings of running high, particularly in the wake of the riots themselves. But unfortunately for Lucy, I mean, she posted this even before there were any riots. So there couldn't have been any suggestion that she was sort of riding on that wave. But yes, I mean, I think a lot of people have political biases, and that might have played a part.
Right. And so is there anything that can be done on Lucy's behalf? Because obviously there are a growing number of people, many ordinary people, but certainly, you know, people like Liz Truss now being sort of focused on her detention and asking for something to be done. Is there anything that can be done or would be?
Yes, well, the FSU have paid for a fantastic defence team, and we've got an appeal hearing coming up on the 15th of May. The Court of Appeal will, it's an appeal against her sentence, and we really hope that justice will prevail and her sentence will be reduced.
Right. And let's talk about a couple of other stories as well, because one of the things I spotted on the Telegraph this morning, you might have seen it, and it's somewhat surprised me actually, that 5 years after the first lockdown, people are still being taken to court for alleged breaches of the COVID restrictions and the COVID rules. According to data analysed by the Telegraph, about 130 people appeared in court for hearings related to alleged COVID breaches in the past 6 months. That seems ridiculous, doesn't it?
It does seem ridiculous, but I think we're living in a climate where a lot of emphasis is placed on what people say and less on what they do. So it doesn't surprise me at all that people are still being taken to task on things they may have said about COVID or restrictions they didn't follow, which in themselves were extremely illiberal and not really something you would expect to see in a Western democracy.
Yeah, exactly, because I was under the impression an awful lot of people who had been fined in particular had been refunded some of those fines because the fines were to be a bit over the top and ridiculous, and so I wasn't aware that there were still people kind of waiting to go through the criminal justice system, particularly since we learned when Keir Starmer supposedly was visited on Christmas Eve during COVID by that voice coach, that the police said they wouldn't bother investigating it because it was too long ago.
Yeah, there does seem to be a lot of inconsistencies around how the police deal with certain offences and depending on who the individual is as well. So it doesn't really surprise me. I think it seems to us, at least at the Free Speech Union, that there is a lack of consistent approach by the police to certain crimes, and it's unfortunate that people are finding themselves at the wrong end of the law when they simply said something potentially intemperate online.
Yeah, and I mean, one final, I suppose, glint of light, perhaps, in the dark tunnel of no freedom of speech is that Donald Trump seems to put the fear of God into Keir Starmer, because apparently he's going to back down on this legal but harmful content on social media they were going to impose in the wake of the Southport riots, actually, a new kind of, I suppose, criminal classification, which would be things that you couldn't say even though they weren't illegal on social media. It looks like he's not going to do that now.
Well, it's not entirely clear what the Labour government are intending to row back on. I mean, they've got the Online Safety Act that has now come into force and obviously gives Ofcom some very wide-ranging powers. And I think the reasons why people like Elon Musk are concerned is because it affects all forms of service provider social media platforms if they have a UK audience, so even if they're not UK owned or UK based. And some of the fines are, I mean, the fine is, I think it's something like £18 million or 10% of your global turnover if you fail to comply, which is obviously massive amounts of money. So it's understandable that there's concerns around it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Jill, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Jill Levine, Legal Counsel at the Free Speech Union, going out there to battle for Lucy Connolly. Good for them, because I think enough time has passed. You know, if you wanted to teach the woman a lesson, you know, I even understand that a little bit, but not 31 months in jail without any kind of ability to visit your children, who are quite young, and your husband, who's quite ill. Absolutely extraordinary. Tony from Barrow in Furness says, Mike, the jihadi bride will need to be watched 24 hours a day, and they want to bring back, will no doubt need lifelong health care, and will be on disability money for life. Well, that's another consideration. Paul in Fife says, morning, Mike. Starmer has had a hatred for the hospitality industry for two reasons. Firstly, he was thrown out of a pub when campaigning. Plus, he wants to be seen to be hammering the hospitality industry to impress his Muslim friends, who, let's face it, do not want pubs and nightclubs in this country. Khan is a prime example. And one finally from Clive in Suffolk about the idea of the NHS going door to door to deliver health care. He says, I think the NHS has come up with a great scheme. It just needs a few adjustments. It should be run using the ice cream van principle. The van would park in the street and play the theme from Casualty. Prospective clients would queue up waiting for a consultation. They could give away contraception and sign sick notes. I'm sure this would help all of those working from home. Just a thought. Very good. I like it. Yeah, how ridiculous. We might have to develop that story a bit more tomorrow, because we haven't had time really to get into it too much today. So much going on, because it is, of course, April the 7th. It's Monday. It's 9:32. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:35. Someone just said, did someone just ring your doorbell at home? No, we can do that here. It's called the magic of broadcasting. You want to do it again? There you go. Is everybody there? Yeah, it's the NHS. What do you want? Want to know if you need anything? Yeah, I need a couple of bananas, you know, a bottle of wine. You can go in the shop and get me some oatmeal, maybe. Yeah, and some more sugar. No, I meant if you need anything, you know, health-wise. Oh, no, I'm fine, thanks. All right, see ya. Go on to the next one. Ring another bell. See how you get on. Bugger off. I don't answer the door to strangers. By the way, this is the last day of the Oasis competition. If you haven't applied for tickets, you've got to do it now, because you could be in with a chance of seeing the biggest event of the summer, and it is the Oasis competition, the Oasis tour that nobody can get tickets for. We've got some. You've got your last chance to win it today. It all ends at 11 o'clock tonight. Have a listen. How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Thank you very much indeed. And closes at 11 p.m. tonight, so get yourselves organised for that. Brad in Cambridge says, the Scots get mocked for their accent? Surely not. And Steve on the BBC says, don't forget this is the same BBC that only a few days ago broadcast live Eid prayers and celebrations on our television. There's a definite agenda with our so-called national broadcaster. And Sean in Norfolk says, morning Mike, how bad must this country be if Californians are telling Harry Cole we've lost the plot? Well, there's one Californian who, of course, is formerly British, formerly a member of the royal family, who is Prince Harry, although I don't think he likes to be called that anymore. You know, you're my liege, I think you'll go with. Angela Levin's here, royal biographer. Angela, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Unusually, we're not actually going to talk about Harry today, are we? We're actually going to talk about his uncle, Andrew, who's got himself embroiled in some kind of strange spying scandal which involves bombshell court documents, an investment fund, and sort of infiltration by all sorts of members of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yes, it's quite scary, isn't it?
Yes.
It all has come about since the interview at Newsweek 219, when he spoke all about what he was going to do and how wonderful everything was. And he just was ridiculously mobile on it. And so he then was removed from being a working royal. And so he obviously thought he's got to make some money, because how does he earn anything? Yeah. He doesn't. And so he got his best aide, Dominic Hampshire, who helped him to get some money. Well, along came what everybody believed was a Chinese spy.
Yeah.
And spoke to him about, you know, how to make money by doing a special thing under the sea and all sorts of things. But, you know, he went to see his brother in this, to Charles. The spy didn't come, but Dominic Hampshire did, and they did it in a rather cunning way when the staff who stopped people coming in weren't looking, so they nipped in.
Right.
And they met 3 times about this procedure, but nothing was actually mentioned about who was the troublemaker and how he's got to keep well away. But Andrew did feel that he had help at hand, and he just wanted his brother to let him get on with it. But it could have been absolutely disaster. This guy was called Yang Yengbol,
yeah.
And his name, he was also called 83. But for the English people, he was called Chris. so that you didn't think that he was actually Chinese.
Ah, okay.
So
and he was banned from Britain on national security grounds, wasn't he?
Exactly, yes.
You
he
think?
was.
I mean, you would think Andrew would have slightly better advice, wouldn't you? Because it seems to me that when he was told, well, you can't be paid any more money and you can't be a working royal, he then decided that he would have a go at sort of raising a few funds by himself. You would have thought that somebody somewhere would have had a word with him and said, look, there are certain, things you can't do. There are going to be certain walls that you can't go through. And there will be certain businesses that you can't get involved in.
Well, yes. I mean, he's been very friendly with the Chinese.
Yeah.
He sends the president a birthday card every year. So he wants to keep in touch with him, which actually makes you concerned even about that, actually.
Yeah.
Because they can come along and, eat you up, very slowly and carefully, say nice things and you get involved. But Dominic Hampshire should never have said anything about this Chinese adventure.
No.
How could it possibly work? It couldn't.
No.
And now the king is getting told off and shown up, and everyone who's not a monarchist is saying, "Oh, look, what's happening with him."
Yeah.
But he wasn't told all the detail. Whose fault that was, I don't know. But actually, to try and skivvy that idea in is actually very concerning.
But they've got a pretty bad history, haven't they, the royal family, of knowing how to deal with these kinds of, shall we say, tricky countries and difficult investments. Do you remember that story a while ago, a few years back, of Charles supposedly being in receipt of bags of suitcases full of money from the Emir of Dubai or something, because it was going to be donated to his charity, and it didn't strike him as odd at all that he was walking around London with bags stuffed full of cash. Thought that was perfectly normal.
Yes, but I think it's the age. They do live in a sort of cage, don't they?
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
They're not sort of people who are out and about and can see what's going on. But I think that's the problem. They rely on aides, and if the aides are good, they're very, very helpful and do marvellous things with them and protect them and inform them and say to them, don't do this, it's not good, it's ABC. But actually, if you haven't got somebody like that, and I believe that Prince Andrew's aides were not that didn't go through to the upper levels where the top people who advise King Charles would run through what this man was doing, Dominic Hampshire.
Yeah.
And I think he just came to help Andrew, but Andrew didn't have to ask anybody else if he could have this man. I think that you've got to be very careful. I mean, Andrew's a difficult guy to deal with. And I think you need to watch out on him very, very carefully.
Yes, I think
so. He doesn't mean harm, but he does actually, he's not terribly bright, and somebody can twist him and make him do something like work with the Chinese, which is not exactly what we want.
Well, quite. And this is the trouble. I mean, as you say, he's not terribly bright, and he's not terribly well versed in the ways of the world when it comes to people using him and using his name for access to certain people. I mean, certainly this guy Yang, I think before he was kicked out of the country, sort of managed to gain access to the Houses of Parliament and was seen at various receptions, being introduced to people.
Yes, he went to Andrew's birthday party, where there'd be lots of royals there.
Right.
And this is where any spy can say, delicious, and start talking and putting things or noticing where their entries and exits and what's going on and who's where. You just can't have that. You just can't.
Yes, no, it's all a very curious situation, the state of affairs. But very good to talk to you, Angela, and delightful to be able to talk to you without having to mention no awful pair in Montecito.
Or Meghan.
Yes, absolutely right. Thank you very much indeed. Angela Levin, their royal biographer. Got a lot of... this is great, by the way. Bob in Aberdeen, you know what I'm going to do. He says, my two dogs are going ballistic every time you put that doorbell on. Please stop. You knew that would happen. Sorry. And Els Bells, funnily enough, in Shropshire, says, Mike, has Rachel from Accounts entered the competition for free tickets to see Oasis? Well, presumably she has, I would imagine so. Sarah says, oh, Mike, it was you. I just went and answered my door and nobody was there. Stop ringing that bloody doorbell, says Stuart. My German Shepherd is going nuts. I'm sorry. I apologise profusely. But just in case you still think it's me, one from Wendy in Clackmannanshire says, I'm listening upstairs, just shouted down to my husband that someone's at the door. It does actually sound like a ring doorbell, doesn't it? That's probably why. Anyway, all over Britain, people are answering their doors, says John in Norwich. I'm sorry about this. We'll try not to do it again, but I can't promise. It's 9:45.
This only happened to me today on the way to the studio in this very building. I've told you this already, I'm in the lift.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think of this, Rebecca. This is how mad the world is. Two men, am I allowed to say that? And a woman.
Yeah.
Doors open, floor two. I said ladies first. Looked at me like I'd literally got into her house on Christmas Day and weed on the kids. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do anymore. Oh, if we're starting this at 3, the world's gone nuts.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:47. Julie Hartley-Grew will be here in about 10 minutes' time to tell us what's coming up. Neil says, Mike, the Prime Minister does have a GB-branded plane. Yeah, I think I've certainly seen him getting into one. Whether or not it's actually at his disposal at all times, I'm not really sure. I usually agree with Isabel, says Becky from Devon, but Lindsay Hoyle, a good speaker, as she watched PMQs, the way Starmer is allowed to avoid every single question, it's turning the Commons into an absolute joke. And George says, scrap the Motability scheme as it is. The vehicles issued should be basic and from a very limited list. As for paying for an upgrade, if you can afford to do that, I would suggest you're gaming the system. I think that's right. Absolutely right. Let's get a voice note from Andy on COVID.
Hiya, Mike. Great show as usual. Just regarding the people who are still being taken to court for COVID breaches, I'm sure they said the police couldn't investigate Keir Starmer regarding his visits by his speech therapist, as it was too long ago. Surely something's not right there.
Yeah, that was entirely right. And that's what I was saying earlier. It was true that the police said they couldn't investigate the voice coach because at the end of the day, it was too long ago.
So how is it possible that these COVID cases are still rattling through the judicial system? It doesn't make any sense at all. Good morning, Mike. These kids that do knife crime, says Sharon, should be sent to rehab in the army. They have no respect or discipline and are allowed to run riot on our streets in the UK. Sharon's in Staffordshire. This is on the back of the news that basically an awful lot of people in a Times survey for one of their sort of think tank type operations says that many people now think that anyone who commits knife crime in this country, whether it is an offensive actual stabbing or whether it's just possession of a knife, should face some form of national service. And it's off the back of another tragedy that took place at the weekend in West London, Shepherd's Bush to be precise, where a young teenage boy was stabbed to death, aged 17. A 16-year-old was arrested for the killing, and another boy was stabbed, fortunately not in a life-threatening manner. But it's just got to stop. And, of course, what we were saying earlier was Keir Starmer very happy to have a summit last week on the fictional drama Adolescence from Netflix, but not really that keen to have a proper non-fictional summit about a non-fictional story, i.e. something that's actually true and something that's actually happening on the streets of London every single bleeding day. He doesn't want to have a summit about that. Well, why not? Somebody who might well have done is Boris Johnson. We picked this up at the weekend. This was Carrie Johnson last night. The family obviously visited a safari park. Check this out.
You're thinking very aggressive. Oh, Christ!
There's one of the young Johnsons in the car with Daddy. He opens the window, which you're not supposed to do in a safari park, by the way. He's in a safari park. There's some kind of creature outside, looks a bit like an emu or an ostrich. I'm not quite sure which. Anyway, pokes its beak into the car because the window's wide open, and then takes a peck at Boris. Which is what you can hear him shouting about. Unbelievable stuff. Maybe we shouldn't be too concerned about the Russians sabotaging our infrastructure, says Adrian. Our own government are doing a pretty good job of getting rid of it. Very true. And Chris says, morning, Mike, on the tariffs, Trump is so correct. They were all happy charging America for the last 70 years, making money, and now the tables are turned. Good for America. Well, certainly a lot of people around the world are saying, actually, if only somebody would protect our country in the same way that he is protecting his. And we'll have more of that, I'm sure. The FTSE 100 opened down this morning by about 3%. We'll see how that goes over the course of the next week. A lot of people getting very worked up about the cost of tariffs and the price of stocks and all the rest of it. And obviously, in the short run, yeah, it will have an effect on your savings and on your pensions and all of that. But normally speaking, these things, I mean, every financial advisor you talk to will say these things will always even themselves out in the end, which they probably will. What won't even itself out is the cost of national insurance, the price of which has gone up this month to all sorts of different entrepreneurs and businesses in the country. Donald McLeod is here. We spoke to him a little bit earlier. He runs a bunch of businesses in Scotland in the hospitality industry, and here's what he had to say.
It's perilous with some of the figures we're looking at, and many businesses are going under. You know, I'm worried about my own. I really am.
Yeah.
I mean, going forward, it's, you know, that plus the minimum wage increases. It's a 200 grand hit, as I said before. And where does that money come from? I mean, in London, you're looking at Sadiq Khan getting round the table with UK Hospitality and the Nighttime Industries Association, and they're going to reinvigorate the whole nighttime economy down there. But I don't know how. I mean, he's done the Labour Party have done a fantastic job in Cannes in particular of totally destroying it. Yeah. So now they're a friend of hospitality. I just don't buy that.
I know.
No.
Well, my kids are in town at the moment because we've been celebrating commemorating my mother's death from a year or so ago. And they went out one night. They're staying in London. The one from California, the other one who's coming from Manchester. They went out to see if they could go out for a drink after midnight. Couldn't find anywhere open in London.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're going to increase the hours.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is, we can't afford to pay the staff as it is. You know, it's become a real burden, and so hours are getting cut, shifts are getting cut, jobs will go. And yeah, let's increase hours as if this is some sort of panacea, there's some sort of, magic cure. No danger. I mean, they really need to start supporting the hospitality. We hard cash, reduce the NI load, reduce the rates, reduce VAT, down to something reasonable, round about the 10%, something like that, you know, which they've not done, and they refuse to do. Yeah.
Let's talk about this weird story at Edinburgh University, though, because apparently it's become the first university in the United Kingdom to undertake accent bias training to stop anti-Scottish bullying. Apparently there's not enough Scottish people going to Edinburgh University.
Well, who's more now? They're all getting a bit of a stushy about this, aren't they? Are they favouring, as they would say? But I mean, there is some truth in it. I mean, well, you know, we slam a lot of the sort of diversity and inclusion, it's sort of rhetoric, you know, policies that are going there. But it seems to be that, you know, Scots only make 25% of the school body, and they've been discriminated against by, and what they're complaining about, allegedly, discriminated by English students, snobs who come from privileged backgrounds and who mock Scots for their accent. How dare they? And for being working class, and you know, it's got so much, you know, of a problem that they've actually instructed the lecturers in Edinburgh Uni, you know, to draw the attention to the students there. Now, language discrimination has always been about, as we know, you know, from the early days of the BBC. Hello, how are you? Yes, you know, everybody talked to the clip tones of the southeast, but people from like Liverpool, the northeast of England, Newcastle, they could, you know, they could never get on the airways to save themselves. But you know, within uni, this is quite worrying actually, if that exists, and you know, nobody likes discrimination.
No. Is it not more likely? Is it? So here's the thing, right? The two big stories of the day: door-to-door NHS to tackle health crisis. That's what caused the doorbell to be ringing in the first place. But I've still got many of you saying, "Pack it in." Ellie in Wales says, or is it Elle? Bloody hell, Mike! Have you ever heard how sodding loud a border collie barks when the doorbell rings? Pack it in. I can't. It's not. I'm not in control of it. It just keeps setting itself off. Gary and Paisley, that blooming doorbell. I'm sitting at home and heard it, and then I went to get up to answer it and quickly realised I don't even have a doorbell. Happy Monday. Yeah, there you go. Karen Decker's even getting involved. I mean, for heaven's sake. The door-to-door thing with the NHS, though, it's got to be mad, hasn't it? I think the NHS coming door-to-door to prevent sickness is more to catch people out for fraud, says Elle. And somebody else, Barry, says, you got me out of bed to answer that. But can you imagine, though? I mean, the NHS, who can't organise their own workload, right, in a hospital, who can't organise a doctor's surgery appointment, who can't organise a dentist for you, want to send people around door to door to find out how you are. Now, according to the piece in the Telegraph, right, Wes Streeting says he's really interested in the community health worker model and the impact that it might be having. We're seeing some really encouraging signs about what can happen if you've got the right care in the right place at the right time. But under the model, this is what they say it would do. A community health worker is allocated a patch of 120 homes, typically paying monthly visits to see if help is needed. Results from the first pilot scheme in Westminster suggest a dramatic impact, with a 10% drop in hospital admissions over a year. Well, how can you measure that? I mean, that's ridiculous, including a 7% fall in those arriving at A&E. Well, how do you tie those two things together? You seriously telling me that because you've got somebody ringing a doorbell on somebody's house once a month, that they're no longer having to go to A&E, that they're no longer going to hospital? I just don't buy it. I just really don't buy it. Morning, Mike. Keith in sunny Blackpool. He wants to talk about the knife crime scenario. He says, bring back the old detention centres and borstals. That will sort these kids out. I know, because I was in one. Well, you may well do that. The other big story of the day, of course, is Keir Starmer. He's going to be getting up a little bit later this afternoon in the West Midlands. He's going to be addressing some people at a car factory. So I presume he's managed to find one that's still actually operational. And he's going to be standing there, no doubt with his sleeves rolled up, no doubt in front of some kind of vehicular moving vehicle, where he's going to be saying that they're softening their stance on net zero and they're going to let you keep your car for longer. If it runs on diesel and if it runs as a hybrid, or if it runs on petrol, you won't have to scrap it in 2030. You get to keep it for another 5 years and scrap it in 2035. Doesn't seem to make much difference to me. How much is the car worth now? Is it going to be worth any more in 2030? No, it's going to be worth less. And when you get to 2035, Labour are going to be out anyway. Hopefully before that. We shall see. Anyway, never mind. There goes the doorbell again. People get very worked up about it. It's going to be terrible trouble. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here. Hello.
You don't have to scrap your car because the net zero, you won't be allowed to buy a new car.
Yeah, but nobody knows
Yeah,
what
it's
the
not
car's
that.
going to be worth.
It's all insane.
Yeah.
The Tory policy was insane.
Yeah.
Labour policy more insane.
Yeah.
Marginally less insane today, but still insane.
Yes, but what nobody can answer for me is how much will the car be worth?